Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. It is a beautiful Tuesday, and I am Nathan the Barbarian. I am your friendly neighborhood agent provocateur for today. And as always, I am not alone. Welcome back to the Hot Mic Podcast. And let me bring everybody on very quickly, and we'll get straight to our conversation. Today, I'm joined by, with, should I say, Irnanetta Wright. How you doing, Irnanetta?
I'm doing well. How are you guys? Happy
Hey,
New Year.
Hey, happy New Year. It's been a minute. Yeah,
It's been a
good to see
minute.
you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we got Terrence Horton with us. What's up, brother Terrence? Or
How are you
Terrace?
guys?
Sorry. Good to see you, man. You got Phil
Yeah.
Heimlich with us. What's up, Phil? Yo, Phil, can you hear you riding low today? Can you hear us, Phil? I'm not sure if you can hear us. And as always, Kevin Aldridge. How you doing, Kev?
Good, man. How you doing?
Okay, I just sent Phil a message, so hopefully he can adjust whatever he needs to adjust. Can you hear me now, Phil?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, great. Well, a lot to talk about. We'll talk a lot about local issues that are being affected by national issues, maybe even some international issues. But first, I want to start with some cultural issues. Of course, you had the Grammys.
What if we don't have any culture?
What if we don't have any culture? Okay, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what to do with that.
Okay,
But
go ahead. I'll do my
appreciate-
best, though. Go
You
ahead.
do your best. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
So we had the Grammys this week. Yeah, this might not be a Phil question, but or a topic.
I see. I'm not hip.
Yeah,
enough.
I'm not sure you're into
That's the
music
point.
and follow
Yeah,
that kind of stuff
sure.
or anything, but
Yeah.
I just want to say props to Queen Bey. She got her Grammy of the Year for her country album. What is it, Cowboy Carter? I must admit that other than maybe one or two songs, I haven't heard a lot of it, but congrats to her. She seemed to be stunned at the Grammys. And there's been a lot of conversation. Remember back when Kanye was like one of us, at least one of mine, right? Straight from the mode of a Barbarian when he got on stage with Taylor Swift. That was a moment. And there's been a lot of conversation about whether she has been snubbed or not. I'm not sure how important that is to everyday issues, but in terms of the world of entertainment, it's been something people have talked about. So seems like she got her due by the Grammys. And there's a part of me, I didn't know I was going to like it so much because I didn't know it, but a lot of people were upset by this. A lot, I guess, of like traditional country folks, even though black people created country music, were upset that Beyonce won Album of the Year. She got snubbed at the Country Music Awards. So I want to just take a second to recognize that maybe the Grammys finally did her right. I appreciate that by the Grammys. There's also been a lot of conversation about, well, let me pull this up. And I don't know if this is on your radar screen or not. Hold on, give me 1 second here. Because you got to see this. Because every single year people talk about the Grammys and they talk about the fashions. And one in particular really stood out to a lot of people, and that is Jaden Smith. Look at this. Now, this is fashion right here, right? Yes. And
yeah, I guess.
that is high fashion. What do you mean? You guess. That's high fashion right there. Look at.
I have to make a
Jaden Smith.
confession. When I saw that, I jumped on Amazon right away and ordered one for myself.
You know what?
Hey, look.
I wish I
Let's not
could.
be prejudiced against Gothic. Okay, we're equal opportunity group here. Okay.
Absolutely. I
All right.
like that attitude.
Just checking.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. I like that attitude. He took a lot of heat, and of course, if you don't know, he is the son of Will Smith. We all know Will Smith, superstar, and Jada Pinkett Smith, superstar. And a lot of people have been calling, him weird for this. And I don't know, I got some weird in me too, y'all. I don't know if you can tell or not.
Oh, we already knew that.
Yeah. But you know what? Let's be real here. We all got some weird in us. And in a world where you get criticized for stepping outside the lines, I appreciate somebody that says, you know what? Boom, I'm wearing it. And I did a little digging into it. Were you going to say, Irnanetta?
Well, I was just going to say, the fact that we're talking about it right now is something that it serves the purpose when you think about marketing after the fact.
Yeah.
If you're having discussions around it, then that means it did what it was intended to do. Because we're getting ready to have a full conversation about what he chose to wear to the award show. So
Yeah.
And not only that, you never know how some of this stuff is going to catch on. So what's weird today becomes trend and fad tomorrow. I think a lot.
Yes.
That's happened with a lot of the outfits I wear, so I understand.
Exactly, Phil. I mean, that's why we got the Heimlich maneuver brand of clothing is going to be coming out here lately. The reason why they call it that is you won't need the Heimlich maneuver because it'll make you sick and you'll get whatever's in you out of you, but without having the physical hands being placed on you. But I digress. No, I mean a lot of the creativity that we have in the society comes from people that you might consider to be eccentric or unique or maybe even a little bit strange. In many ways, these are the folks who set our fashion trends and who come up with the technology that we adopt and use. So, a lot of kids that, that we might have felt like were weird in high school and who were a little bit different, are running the metas of the world now and have created all of this stuff that we can't live without. So who's laughing now, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So I say embrace your weird. And I did a little checking. So number one, I want to give him some props here. Like the suit, I think it's Tom Ford, whatever that means, but the suit is on point. Now, young dude is really rocking the suit well. Like, I don't know if anybody else in the world could pull that off, but he's pulling it off. So I did some checking, and like, this is a real thing. Like, a real fashion designer got with him and designed this helmet. And just so you know, it's like inspired by Transylvania. So that it's like it's a
Are you
vampire
talking about the one in
castle.
Kentucky or the vampire one?
No, the vampire one, right? It's a vampire
there is
castle.
a Transylvania University in Lexington. You know
Yeah.
that.
Just
want to clarify which we're talking about. But continue.
I'm pretty sure it's the vampire one.
It's the vampire one. I checked with the designer. I checked with the designer. It's the vampire one. And so I started thinking like, well, maybe he's making a point here because art is like commentary, right? Maybe he's saying like, look, the music world, the entertainment industry is like a vampire or something like that. Now, I might be reading too much into it. I can be guilty of that, but I just want to give a brother props for stepping out, embrace your weird, and he might be making a statement here. He might be, or it might not be. It can go either way.
We had an interesting point in the barbershop we brought up that being Will Smith's son, like you hear about Will Smith granting people's wishes. Can you imagine being Will Smith's son and be like, hey, Dad, I want to go to Paris for crumpets today. And he's like, all right, let's get the jet and go. I mean, so I could imagine, what's going on in his head, man. He's probably something to be said, like you said, Nathan, with the ability to be creative as possible, because a lot of times people handicap people's, especially our kids' creativity, but the ability to, be able to get that out, and be as creative as you want to be instead of somebody's like, no, don't do that. That's stupid. I'm all for it, man. I think I agree with you on Nathan.
Let it go. Be silly. Embrace your weird. That's the uniqueness in you. That's what I'm getting from this. It is. And then the other thing, and you kind of said something that made me think about this, Terrace, is like, this is what he's been sitting around thinking about for the last 2 weeks. Like, all of us have been terrified of what Trump is going to do.
Yeah.
And he got time to sit around thinking about what he's going to rock to the Grammys. It must be a good life.
Hey man, let me just say this. There are a certain class of people like Phil Heimlich in this country that have it so good. They have it so good that they're above the politics, man. They're not worried about it. They're soaring above the clouds while the rest of us is worried about the rain and the hailstorm is coming, man. When you're above the clouds, you got time to come up with creative headgear and that type thing. Hey, but I want to ask you guys this, and maybe it was just me, because I saw Will Smith. He had a segment on the Grammys, I guess, where he stood up and was introducing somebody. And I just still got this feeling about Will Smith, man. It's just like he can never recover what he had before that Chris Rock moment. And it's just like I kind of look at Will and I just don't, like, he just don't hit me the same now anymore. And when I see him, it's just kind of like, man, there go that dude. And that's a shame. I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but that's how I felt when I saw him last night. It's almost like he's ruined whatever he had prior to that. You just don't look at him the same anymore. Maybe that's
same way I feel about Snoop. How about that?
Same way I feel about Snoop.
Same way I feel about Snoop.
But I'm with you there, Kevin. I feel that. Yeah, you just articulated it. Yeah, I feel that. It's not the same. Like, and you do this to another brother. I'm like, on national TV, no less, bruh. Come on now. But I'm with you. Yeah, Snoop is not on my list ever again. Ever again. But also, props to Kendrick Lamar. He went away. He won best rap song 2025 for "They Not Like Us," his famous diss song of Drake. And I didn't know he was that highly decorated. He's won like 22 Grammys and had like 50 something nominations. I'm like, I don't really watch the Grammys like I used to, so I was a little bit shocked by that. But props to that brother. Happy for him. Love to see my people shining. But I have to admit to the crew, and you tell me if I'm a little bit off on this, or maybe you see it too. But I had a problem with him winning Song of the Year for that song. I had a problem with it. I'm not saying
Okay.
it's a big problem. The song is dope. You know, it fits what they do. But I just had a problem with him winning Grammy of the Year for a diss song about another brother. I just had a problem with that. Could just be me, right? It's also a song that kind of promotes division over unity. It could just be me. Could just be way my barbarian brain works. But I'm like, damn, that song really? Ah. It was almost like the industry was like rewarding him for being divisive
Well, but I think
with
it's
another brother.
I think it's like anything else. You know, so it's an art form, right? It's an art form. So Kendrick Lamar might have been writing that as a diss track to Drake, but it took on a whole life of its own because I think everybody who listened to that and applied the lyrics of that song to their life or their situation, or even as we looking at it right now, like a lot of people be like MAGA, they not like us. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so it's like it's like what all great art does. It takes on a life of its own to the listener, and I think for that and that reason alone, if a song has that type of impact, even when it transcends what the artist originally intended, I think that does kind of put it into the category of impactful work that might be worthy of a song for the year, regardless of what the original intent was.
I want to agree with that.
Go ahead, Phil.
I was going to agree. I was going to agree with Kevin on that one, and bring up another interesting point about Dolce, the woman who won the rap album of the year. If you notice that Kendrick Lamar wasn't even in that category, and I was like, that don't even make no sense. How can Kendrick Lamar have the best song, clearly hands down the best song of the year, and not be considered the best rap song or album of the year? And they gave it to Dolce, and then whenever I was like, oh, it's because they're on the same label, and understanding the music industry how it is, it's like a pecking order type of thing, and that's where there was TDE's way of introducing Dolce to people who never even seen her before, and now they're researching her tiny desk, and they're seeing how she's from Tampa, and they're introducing her to the industry and bringing Kendrick out, because I'm sure Kendrick's done with the music industry and he has to be motivated to make songs like Not Like Us, and because the music industry is not something that rappers that last long term. That's just my take on that one.
And I think though, Nathan, to your point, there have been other situations, like someone referenced in the comments, the Oscar that Denzel won, or I can even remember when Halle Berry won her award. And I want to say the movie was, don't quote me, I think it was Monster Ball. I think it was.
Yeah.
I felt the exact same way about that. I wanted her to get her recognition, but is that what she had to get her recognition for? So that struck me very, very much the same way. I think in this particular scenario, I agree with Kevin that when you think about art takes on a different personification for every person, and anybody, it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what race they are. You can use the terminology, they not like us. Maybe you don't have the rest of the lyrics and understand what the whole diss was about for Drake, but you can put that on anyone and they can connect to that. So, and Kendrick Lamar is just an artist. I mean, he's won awards just specifically for his poetry and how his poetry looks. So I think it's something to consider as we think about, him winning. But I can't say that I don't understand your comment there and what that speaks, because I've had other experiences where I feel the exact same way around the awards.
Yeah, as Regina writes, it's just a dope song, though. It is. I get it. We suckers for a dope song.
Yes, I get it.
Trump, actually, Trump, they were playing this at Mar-a-Lago the night that Trump won. So anybody can use it, right? It is what it is.
Absolutely. That's what I mean. It takes on a life of its own. And hey, Kendrick is, I gotta give him props. I mean, in a music industry where there's a sea of garbage out there, where a lot of times you can't even understand what rappers are saying, or even what they talking about. They got a nice hook and a beat, and that's about it. And the rest of it is garbage. You got to give Kendrick his props for his skills and the quality of what he puts out. And certainly, I think very much deserving of the
Well,
Yeah,
it
I
acknowledgement.
puts you
thought.
in places also to have to do some research. I remember talking to kids about this specific song, and they didn't really know some of the background information on that. So they actually took it upon themselves because they wanted to understand, to go in and do some research around it. Where is this coming from? What is he referencing? Is there validity to it? And so several of his songs do that for you. It puts you in a place where it causes you to ask additional questions. And man, isn't that what music should do?
Yeah, it's just something about the human's experience. Like, I think Anthony is spot on. Like, to me, I look at this just like Denzel winning for playing a bad cop. I see no difference. Filmmaking is art too. But it's like, and again, I'm just thinking, like, if the song was "They Are Like Us" and had more of a unifying message, it wouldn't have taken off. It's something about humans. We gravitate to that kind of energy. We gravitate to we're different than them. We gravitate toward divisiveness, but then we complain when we're victims of it. And that's what I kind of see in this. But again, in my barbarian brain, I could be doing what I normally do and just kind of seeing what I see in a kind of a tunnel
But you know
vision.
what's interesting in that? Yeah, no, what's interesting in that dynamic that you just talked about, and Irnanetta coming out of education. I say this to kids all the time, is that, for the early part of your life, or your formative years, your adolescent, teenage years, you're trying to be just like everybody else, right? Like, that's the thing. Homogeneity. You don't want to be the different person, right? Like, it's not cool to say they not like us, because you're trying to be like everybody else. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to differentiate yourself from the crowd, to show how you're unique, how you're special, how you're different. So it's interesting in terms of how we look at it. Like, and I don't know, Nathan, you may have told your son at some point in time, as you're teaching him, hey, don't worry about trying to be like the rest of the crowd or whatever. Like you said, embrace your individuality. And in the younger part of our culture, that's resistant. That's not cool to be the outcast, or the person who's not like everybody else. And then the rest of your life, you try to be that person, because that's what gets you through, that's what gets you the breakthrough. So I think it depends on kind of how you look at it, because you know both sides carry with them sometimes their negative connotation. Like, uh groupthink. Like, we don't think of groupthink as a good thing. It's like, it's the free thinker, the individual person who don't think like everybody else. Like, that's what gets celebrated. So I can kind of see both sides of the coin. Like, we try to have it both ways sometimes, where it's like, yes, unity, let's all be like this, and then on the other hand, we celebrate that individualism, that uniqueness, that person who's able to break from the crowd and be something else. So I think really it's just all what kind of lens you bring
But do you
to it.
remember that like previous to this famous diss song, probably the other most famous diss song in hip hop was Hit 'Em Up by Tupac. His
No
infamous
Vaseline.
diss when he
Mhm.
talked about having sex with Biggie's wife. Like, had that won a Grammy, I would have felt the same way. Like, you getting a Grammy for this? It's like and I think Classy once said it. It's like you're promoting beef to win a Grammy, right? So do we like beef or do we not like beef? Like, when beef turns into red streets, it's a problem. But we promote it through the music, which people already know. And now here the Grammys are saying, yeah, yeah, we're gonna give you a Grammy for basically a beef song. That's basically what it is. But I might be getting
Yes, we
we
do
do
like
like
beef.
beef.
That's the answer to your
And
question.
which
We do
leads
like
us
beef. I mean,
which
think about
leads
it.
us
Think about it. If a fight breaks out, people are quick to surround and watch versus
right.
break it up. So people who don't like beef try to break it up. People who like beef get around and antagonize, and there are always more people who are around antagonizing that are trying to break it up. Usually, in most
Which
cases.
leads me to Donald Trump, right? You're right. We do love beef. And that's the reason why he's playing games and creating beefs, right? In terms of terrorists and other frictions, because there's an element of the American, of us as Americans. We love it. We love it, but we'll get to that in a second, and we're on our way to it.
I
So
have to say, I have to say that one of our listeners in the chat has made a request. Nat says, "Can we hear a couple lyrics from the song, Phil, the one that Irnanetta was kind of singing?" The answer is no. I'm just. Let's face it. I listen to I listen to Herman's Hermits. You know what I mean? All right, that's a joke. You're too young. It was the '60s bubblegum band, okay, but you don't get it. But the bottom line is, I'll face it, I'm not hip enough to contribute to this. So let me just be honest.
Hey man,
That's
we'll take a
perfectly
few
okay.
bars from Herman's
That's
Hermits right now. Go ahead, stick, Bill.
It's something like, I'm Henry VIII, I am Henry VIII, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She's been married 7 times before, and everyone is an Henry. I wouldn't be a Willie or Sam. No, it's Henry. Henry VIII, I am. Okay.
I blame Kevin for that.
Okay.
Please, no
Man,
applause.
it's
No applause. I know I've got talent, so I
blame
don't need
Kevin for
any.
that. I blame you for that, Kevin.
The cool factor just went up like
No, it
5
did not.
points
No,
for
it
you right
did not.
there.
It went down 30 points.
I've never had a cool factor. So
I blame
that can go
Kevin for the
up.
last minute of the show. Do not blame me, blame him.
I could sing during the closing credits.
Yeah.
So moving on here, let's talk about some local issues here. So we know that there's a big crackdown right now. Trump is in office. Week 2, it feels like week 2000. And he is putting a lot of force from the federal side down on to the states to comply. Well, people need to remember, unless you forgot, Ohio is a red state. Republicans have a supermajority. And there's been a big question mark. We talked about this on a previous podcast. Like, what should be the role of the Cincinnati Police Department? Personally, I don't want the Cincinnati Police Department using our resources trying to help ICE to go find somebody that's so-called illegal, which is hypocritical, right? Because white folks are illegal in this country. They stole this land. Now we want to come to the point where you want to kick people out. But anyway, so now Ohio lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, have responded. They have responded with House Bill 26, which would direct state and local law enforcement to assist immigration and customs enforcement. And they're saying that the police, that's the Cincinnati police included, will be required to report anyone that they arrest and they believe to be undocumented, and the jails must be used to detain immigrants upon request. So, as to my knowledge, this has not been signed yet. But again, the Republicans have a supermajority, and would not be surprised if DeWine signs it. But I want to know, what do you think? Should Ohio law enforcement, should the Cincinnati Police Department be required to help ICE? Might want to jump in there, Phil. What do you think?
I think that, and there's a quote from Martin Luther King that I can't quite remember, but basically what it says is that when the laws are unjust, we should not obey them. And I think what we have to do, not just for the police, but as citizens, I think we have to ask ourselves, it's one thing to do what the mayor said, and I agree, is to follow the law. That should be a principle we agree with. But I would just say for myself, and I've thought about this, if they get to the point where they're dragging out Hispanic grandmothers that have lived in this country for 20 years and they're dragging them out, that kind of thing, I would hope that I would be willing to harbor somebody like that, because to me it goes against God's laws to do something. Now again, if you're talking about guys with felony records, I don't mind deport them, that's okay. But the way things work is it never stops there. Okay, it never stops there, and they're not going to get millions of people just who have criminals. And when it gets to that point, to me, and maybe I'm exaggerating, I think it's like those who harbored runaway slaves during slavery. They broke the law, but they were righteous in what they did.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tricky one for me, and we've had this conversation before. I think you get into a tricky place where you say that law enforcement should not be in the business of enforcing laws. So if it is the law, if a law is being broken, then I think it is up to our law enforcement to enforce that law and go about it. Now, there's a question about how do you do that? Like, should you be busting into schools and churches and apprehending people? That's a different question than if I catch you in the commission of another crime, or even if I pull you over in a traffic stop and I find out that you're an illegal person and you're in the country illegally, then yes, law enforcement should enforce the law. It is a safety thing. You cannot say that on some levels. I'm not saying everybody who's in the country illegally is a criminal in the way that we think about somebody who is perpetrating a crime against person or property. But certainly there are some people who are in the country illegally who are that. And so it is a matter of public safety to find those folks and get them off the streets.
If I could say, if you're a police officer, Kevin, and you pull over somebody and it's for some whatever speeding or some traffic thing, and you find that they are not citizens, they're illegal, and yet they have no criminal record.
Yes.
They've been in this. Let's say they've been in this country for 10 years, have a job. No, what I'm asking is, if you're the police officer, would you? I mean, these are tough decisions, but would you, in good conscience, go ahead if it gets to this point, which I think it will? Would you, in good conscience, arrest this person, knowing it would lead to their deportation?
Yes, because it doesn't matter if you've been in the country for 10 years being a good citizen or not. If you're in the country illegally, you've broken a law of the country.
How about the slavery example? How about my slavery example?
What's your slavery example?
Slavery example is that, correct if I'm wrong, those who harbored runaway slaves were breaking the law.
Yeah, and I'm sure if they had been caught at that time, they would have been punished.
There's no question. But what I'm saying is, if you put yourself in that person's position, do you think they did what was right, or that they should have done what the law said and turn in the runaway slave?
I don't think you can compare someone who is escaping slavery and captivity with someone who has, slaves broke no law. Slaves broke no law. They were subjected
They did when they escaped.
Unjust treatment. Well, yeah, no, this is what I'm talking about, though. But you can't compare an escaped slave to somebody who knowingly enters a country illegally and
they
breaks
knowingly
the law,
escaped,
right?
Knowing it was against the law.
Yeah, but Phil, that's not an apples to apples comparison. That's a horrible comparison where you're talking about an unjust act from the beginning, which is enslaving a person, right? So you're beginning with an illegal act, not an unjust act. So would you say that crossing a border illegally is a crime to begin with?
Yeah.
That's not unjust. What's unjust? Tell me what's the equivalent unjust of somebody crossing.
Let me put it this way. Yes, it is a crime, but I will guarantee that any of us on this podcast, if we were living in a poverty-stricken, gang-controlled country, and we had any opportunity to get in the U.S., we'd do it. Every one of us here.
And Phil, you kind of
sure. Well, we're about to be living in that here in America.
Exactly.
So we'll see where.
So I'm looking ahead to that. We are about to live in that.
I say that hyperbolically, just in jest, but I don't think that. Again, when we start from the premise, and I don't think that there's anything unjust about a law that says you got to come into the country the right way. To suggest that is an unjust law, I think it's part of the problem. I'm not saying it's an unjust law, but I am saying in the circumstances, I'm looking for the perspective of the person who's harboring the illegal. Okay, I'm saying that from that perspective, if we have a circumstance where it's a law-abiding, hardworking citizen who's been here for years, and the law says I have to turn them in, I would say my conscience, and it's easy for me to say, I'm not in this situation, but I would hope my conscience would cause me to say, no, I'm going to harbor you. I'm going to let you stay here. I don't care, because the result of your being deported in this situation is clearly unjust.
I think, though, to Nathan's question, I think the question, while I think that there is validity with what both of you are sharing, and Kevin, I remember us having some of this conversation before when we started talking about laws and whether or not it was law enforcement's responsibility to help enforce that. But I think the question in this particular example is specific to it. We're talking specifically about immigration. We're talking about, in most municipalities, the law enforcement in those municipalities are already overworked and under resourced to start with. So when we think about that, it becomes how we think about implementation. So to Kevin's point, it's one thing to see someone that has already that is in the process of committing another crime, or there is a traffic stop. I mean, we can talk about that in a lot of different ways, because people can also create opportunities for traffic stops and all of that. But if there's a traffic stop and it's determined that this person has broken the law, or in this instance, that they're illegal, but to purposely set up to start with, where we're going out and obviously only targeting at this point those that are brown, because there's not been any conversation yet about the illegal immigrants in the country that are not brown to some degree, to target those, and then to use the resources of many communities that are already challenged to do that, I think makes it difficult for that community. And we haven't started the conversation about, going into schools or going into churches or any of that. I have a whole different, viewpoint on that altogether. And I don't think that there is anyone on the call that could make me think differently about that, because the schools have enough to deal with already. And the fear of someone coming into the building to even just talk to their students, to try to find their parents, is too much. It's too much to even think about, but I digress. So I think that we have to say, in some instance, the support of it is one thing, but how the implementation is done becomes something else. It becomes the major factor.
Hey, Terrence, you want to jump in there?
In Kentucky, I just want to say I'm happy. And one thing I'll say about Kentucky right now, with Andy Beshear being our governor and him being a Democrat, we kind of weights and balances thing going on with this immigration thing. And I've seen that the ICE, the Homeland Security ICE instructor in Kentucky, I've seen him say that they're only going to approach people who are in the prison system. They're going to go after that first, or if they commit crimes. So I don't know about Ohio, but in Kentucky right now, as far as immigration, I feel that we're sitting in a decent situation. And I think it's highly because we have a Democratic governor that is not, like Trump's doing a lot of stuff out there. And probably if he throws 10 things out there, 2 of those things are going to stick, but 8 of those things are going to create chaos and fear that I see half this country living in right now. And it breaks my heart. But I don't think, and I'm just speaking for Kentucky, because this was a Ohio-based question, I think, that you asked. But from the Kentucky's perspective, I think that over in Kentucky and immigration, we're sitting in a pretty good situation because we have a Democratic governor who is regulating federal law. But I mean, we're not really worried about that right now, because our ICE people said that they're going to go after the people who are already incarcerated or get locked up. They're not going to go breaking down things. So any of that fear that's exacerbated is not true. And in Kentucky, I hope that we can lower that fear so people can live normal lives.
But you live in Dayton, Kentucky, is that correct?
I live in Dayton, Kentucky, yes.
So how do you feel about the Dayton, Kentucky Police Department working with ICE? Do you agree or disagree with that?
That's not going to happen. I can guarantee you that would not happen. Like Irnanetta just said, that our police officers are already overworked and stressed out with other things that they need to be worried about. Even in ICE wouldn't come even I can say, you're asking me about Dayton, Kentucky specifically.
Because that's where you are, right?
I would fight against Dayton, Kentucky police officers working with ICE, or it's something on a national level. If Trump wants that done, he needs to employ the National Guard. He doesn't need to take any resources from local taxpayers' money for his. But it's not going to happen. These are hyperboles that you guys are throwing out there. It's not going to happen. This is more things in Ohio right now.
Well, we don't know. We don't know how. I mean, quite frankly, we don't know how it's going to happen. It could happen. I mean, look, there are a lot of things that Donald Trump said on the campaign tour that people's like, it's not going to happen, and it's happening. I mean, he's doing it. So
I haven't seen him.
You can't say it's not going to.
The things that I've heard Donald Trump
He's
say,
pretty much done everything he said he was
yeah,
gonna do.
and he never said
He's
he was
pretty
going
much
to send
done
ICE to
everything
No,
he
he
said
hasn't.
he was gonna do.
No, he
So,
hasn't.
Hold on.
so,
What
so
about
No, he
this
has
one I
not.
heard? That he's going
huh?
to
No,
take
he has not.
away, he's
He's done a
going to
lot
take
of it.
away handicapped people's parking places. Who came up with that one? Which F around and find out operative came up with he's going to take away handicapped parking places? Or is he going to? Am I wrong? Am I missing?
I'm just focusing on the things he's actually said, things that he actually campaigned on,
He has not.
and that were in Project 2025. I mean, what this dude has signed over 200 executive orders, so you can't say he hasn't done what he said he's going to do. He signed 200 executive orders that have done a lot of. Now they may not have all been successfully implemented, and some may be stopped. But dude has done everything that he said he was going to do, and some of the things that he lied about that he said he wasn't going to do that was in Project 2025 that we all knew he was going to do anyway.
And I have to add around, and Taurus, this is specific to the example that you just gave. When we start talking about DEI, right now the conversation around DEI is connected to minorities. However, DEI is much greater than that. So when you talk about a handicapped individual needing to have some level of equity, having the ability to park closer to an establishment than someone that has the benefit of both of their limbs, that makes it equitable. So when you're talking about policies around, so we can go through each one of those. It's not just about race. It's about race. It's about it's about sex. It's about our handicapped individuals, or individuals that have disabilities. It's about all of those different things, but it's been put in a box to just mean DEI is used synonymous with minority. And so maybe those things haven't been said specifically, but to Kevin's point, he talked about mass deportations. He's planning on doing a process right now that has the entire country concerned right now to some degree, especially leaders in schools, concerned about mass deportation. Kids already not going to school, even if they're legal, because they don't understand the difference. They don't want to be stopped by ICE coming to their location or trying to find their parents to verify that they're legal or not. So I mean, it's more than just what it is, but it's actually how it's beginning to be implemented already. And we've not seen anything when it comes to Project 25. We've seen the list already when it looks at all of the departments that he's already discussing closing those departments and reorganizing those funds. And many of those are supported of social services that individuals, especially seniors in our country, absolutely need. So many of the things he told us, yes, we're already seeing it. And it's been maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll explain what I mean in just a minute, but I just want to go back. So my answer would be absolutely 1,000,000,000% no. I do not want the Cincinnati Police Department involved in ICE raids, and the fact that the super majority of Republicans in Ohio is trying to force us to do it, force the city to do it, is just yet another example of the fact that they're hypocrites. I mean, it's always the Republicans talking about local rule, local rule, local rule. But when it comes to this, all of a sudden you want to force the city of Cincinnati to adopt to what's happening on the federal level. But when Joe Biden was in office, every time they opened their mouth, it was always local rule, local rule, local rule. So I got to point out the hypocrisy in the Republican Party. But I thought that Phil made an excellent point. It's a point that I've made several times about when we get into this conversation about what's legal. There was a time when I was illegal, when I had no rights, when it was illegal to do whatever you want to do to me and my people. So, there is a line that can be drawn in the sand. And, if I was a police officer, and this is one of the many reasons why I'm not, is because it's just some stuff I'm just not gonna do. I don't care what the order is. If I think it's wrong, I ain't doing it. Take your job, take your benefits. I'm not doing it. And if I lived in the 60s, I wasn't going to Vietnam. If I got to go to jail, I'm going to jail because, as Muhammad Ali most famously said, them people are not my oppressor. You are my oppressor. So I'm not, if I was Cincinnati Police Department official or officer, I'm not doing it. And if that costs me the job, it costs me the job. But for those who, do what they got to do because you got to keep the lights on, I completely understand it and respect it. But just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it's moral, doesn't mean that it should be illegal.
Yeah. So Nathan, I think for you to say that, and this is where I say like you and Phil's comparison to slavery is off, because you're talking about, Dr. King's statement is what is an immoral. An immoral law is not one that should be.
But the
that should be followed.
application is
So my
immoral.
question, no. So here's what my question is. So you're saying that having an immigration law, saying that somebody has to enter the country the right way,
that's not what's immoral.
Is immoral.
You're missing the point.
Okay, well, wait a minute. So that's where we have to start, Phil. That is where we have
What
to
is
start.
immoral is when it is applied
that is
to people who are hardworking, long-term residents. I think to send them to a country, take these dreamers. You know, he's trying to get rid of them too. He got rid of that exemption.
Okay. So this is why I say we got to parse this into different conversations. I'm talking strictly about people who are in this country. And we can parsec like dreamers and that, but I'm talking specifically about people who have entered this country.
Criminals, I think
illegally,
knowingly. You have described it wrong, bro. You described it wrong. Yo, Kevin, you've described it. You keep saying people that enter this country illegally, but you are wrong. There's more to the conversation. So you got two types of folks who are so-called illegal. You have a very small percentage of people that jumped the fence or swam the Rio Grande or took a cave and took a tunnel into the country. That's a small percentage of the people. The majority of the people who are here so-called illegally came in legally, but they didn't show up to their court dates. So they're staying illegally, right? And these are people who might have been here 10, 15, 20 years, got families. If I'm a police officer and I see that, I'm not arresting you. I'm not.
Can I get a point? Can I make a point real quick?
So Nathan, why do you? So why? Let me ask this. Let me ask this question. Why do you think they missed their court hearings?
It could be for a variety of reasons.
We can assume they broke the law.
Wait a minute. Here's where you got, and this is what frustrates me sometimes about these conversations.
Good. I want you to be frustrated. Tell me all about it.
Is y'all take the personal, because you want to have a bleeding heart for somebody, okay? You want to take the personal responsibility. Bring this back to slavery, though, but you want to take the personal responsibility off the people who have the opportunity to do the right thing. And when they don't do the right thing and somebody calls them on it, now it's just like, oh, we're supposed to cut them a break because they didn't do the right thing. Look, if you're fleeing a country legitimately, there's a process that you go through where you can seek asylum. They might even release you into the country and say, hey, you got to show back up for a court date. Follow the process. If I don't show up for that court date, man, I just get caught in the wind in the country where I have an opportunity to go through the process and maybe get what I need to get to be here legally and be excused legally, but I don't follow up with that process. If I get caught, I don't care how many years later, that is on me because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And nobody should turn a blind eye to that.
You're right about that.
I can
hear where our difference is. I can hear where our difference is. The difference is because the slavery argument is not about the evil of the act. It's about the application and how you view the law, right? So everything you just said could have been said to a runaway slave. Why did you leave? You know it's illegal. Go back to the north.
It begins with a corrupt, immoral act. Nathan, that's what you and Phil. That's what you and Phil are not acknowledging.
I know, bro.
The idea of slavery in and of itself is immoral.
I cannot hear you, bro.
The idea of slavery in and of itself is immoral. It's an immoral thing.
It comes down to the individual. That's what we're talking about. You know, I think we would all agree that slavery was evil. The difference is you just don't think what these people. I believe you believe that what these
it's not even an apt comparison.
But let me finish it. I know I'm stumbling a bit. Let me get it out. So the difference is that I believe as an individual that rousing up these people is an evil act. You don't. That's what it comes down to. You see this as it's just illegal. Just like back in the day, Kevin. Just like back in the day, there was plenty of people was like, well, it's legal. It's illegal to run away from the plantation. So what you running for? It's just how you look.
Can I make a point?
So for me, I would.
Yeah, we were talking about the police officers, and I jumped in about the police officers, and I want to clarify something because I've got a lot of police officers there, and I got to remember, half of these police officers might be on board with ICE. So I was speaking from my personal perspective. But there might be more.
Right.
If they come to Dayton and ICE is like, we need the city's help, and the police officers in the cities are like, yeah, we want to get down. We trained for this. We want this action. How would I tell them not to do it, especially if they're trying to get down like that?
Right. And Ron C said something. He says the difference is we're not talking about slavery. We're talking about America and America being invaded. And that's a very loaded term. You want to take it back to slavery to justify your point. Well, we're not talking about slavery. I'm just using slavery, or Phil was using slavery as an example. We're talking about obeying laws, right? That's what it comes down to. Should the Cincinnati Police Department obey, be involved with what ICE is doing? And I'm just saying personally, no for me. There'll be many officers who have no problem with it. Great. Your morality.
So then we're saying the local police should never cooperate with the feds in the event of stopping guns or drugs or anything or anything on that level. So if you're saying that local police departments should only selectively cooperate with the feds, that's what I'm saying.
That's not really what I'm saying.
You can't say it's okay for local police departments to cooperate with the feds in certain instances and follow the law, but because you got a bleeding heart in a certain situation that they shouldn't cooperate in another one. And that's where I'm saying you get into a slippery slope where you want to suggest that law enforcement should not follow the law.
I can tell you as a prosecutor and police, it's considered appropriate. They have discretion. Okay. I would agree. And I think what AFTAB said was pretty reasonable. Hey, we're going to follow the law. The law says we have to do something, we're going to do it. But in an individual situation where if I'm a police officer and I stop somebody for speeding or something, and I know that by my reporting them as illegal, I don't care, give them a ticket, but reporting them as illegal, if I know this is a resident, a hardworking, long-term resident, and I know they're going to be deported, if it's me, I wouldn't report them. I just wouldn't do it. I'd use my discretion.
And I'm sure that will probably happen. I mean, that happens every day. You're right. Police officers have incredible discretion. There are some people they give the ticket to and other people that they let go off. And this would be no different. That's different than saying, though, that saying an officer has a discretion to let you go in the violation of the crime is different than saying that they shouldn't. Right? That's two different things to say they shouldn't do it versus you have some discretion, because then you leave it up to them to make the choice on whether they want to exercise that discretion or not. But what I'm hearing is that there should be a flat out no that says that officers shouldn't be allowed to use their discretion. They just shouldn't do it. And I'm saying that is a bad message that we should be sending.
It's a great man. Yeah, I mean, we're having a lot of different conversations. So we're talking about the moral aspect of laws. We're talking about what we would do individually. We're also talking about it from as a constituent, as a taxpayer. Yeah. So let me address it from that angle. As a taxpayer, I do not want my tax dollars being used to assist ICE.
What if your police department wants it? What if your police department wants it? What if they say, yeah, we want to go and assist ICE because we agree with ICE, and your police department doesn't follow with your beliefs as a taxpayer? It's got to go with that. That's a slippery. That's a good one right there.
Your tax dollars is already going to ICE. You already got tax dollars that's going to ICE.
Well, I don't want any more tax dollars going to ICE. Then.
I'd rather go to ICE than over to crime.
All the issues and crime and all the stuff that we got going on in Cincinnati, I want Cincinnati police officers to deal with Cincinnati citizens' issues. Now, if the feds are going to come with some money and assist the city and take it out so it don't come out of our pockets, okay, that makes a little bit more sense, but no. And no, not at all. And again, the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. It's always about local rule until there's a Republican in the White House and he wants to play politics with this immigration thing.
So let me ask you this, Nathan. And maybe we should get somebody from the PD to come in and talk about this, because one of the things that I've heard, and a lot of my perspective is I hear lots of things, and so I try to. So what if I were to tell you that local police were to say that, hey, there's a lot of gang activity or a lot of criminal rings that are going around that are associated with illegal immigration? That groups, that Chilean groups, and this is in fact a fact, not part of that. Lock them up.
Not part of
the political conspiracy theory part that's there. That but people are being victimized by these folks. So are we
They should
saying
already be dealing with it.
that again, we're trying to be selective here about what parts of the law enforcement should do and should cooperate. So get those folks,
Yeah.
but don't
Yeah, we
mess
have the
with
right to be
don't
selective.
mess with other people who. I mean, what if
Kevin, you trying to
using
tell
your
me that we
example,
don't have
what
a
if
right to be
somebody who what if
selective about
somebody
certain laws? That every time a lawmaker or a decision-making body makes a decision and makes a law, I just got to go with it? No, we have the right to resist and say, I think
but
this
there are
is a good
laws that
idea
make
or
sense,
that's a
man,
bad
and there are
idea.
laws that
That's just
don't.
part of being a good citizen. Pushback on the government is part of being a good citizen. I don't have to lay down and just do whatever they want me to do. That's not being a good citizen. If I don't like it, I don't like it. You're supposed to let your voice be heard.
Sure, I'm not
Period.
saying you got to like it. I'm just saying that I think that the message to law enforcement should not be don't enforce the law.
Let me just
That's
throw out
just
one
my
example
message
quick.
to law
Al
enforcement is, I
Al
support you.
Capone was convicted of tax evasion and sent to prison. Okay, now everybody knows the reason they investigated him and sent him away was because he was killing people right and left. Okay, and et cetera, which I think is just fine. And in your example, where okay, let's say there's a gang of a gang of kids that are maybe illegal, and the cops know they're involved in a gang, they're robbing people, they're beating people up. I have no problem in that situation going in and arresting them for their illegal status and deporting them. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. It all kind of depends on the motive and the circumstances.
Yeah, these people coming over here, man, they want to be Americans just like everybody else's
So what do you
ancestors.
say to the people who are standing in line, who are doing the checks and balances, who are following the process and doing everything, and they're not
Well,
over
let
here?
me
They're
answer that point.
waiting
Let
to
me
get
answer
over
that
here.
point. One of the lines that people in my party used for years was, "Oh, I'm not against immigrants. I'm just against illegal immigrants. They just need to do it legally." Well, guess what? Thanks to Stephen Miller and Trump, in his first administration, they severely cut back on legal immigration. In fact, one of those executive orders is kind of ending that refugee program, which is exactly what America was intended for. People fleeing from war zones, Gaza, wherever the heck it is. And so it's important to understand it's not so simple to apply to get in here legally. And we have an administration now that is, and remember about that he said they're eating the dogs, and he said he was going to get those Haitians out of this country. Those Haitians are here legally, okay, but Vance came up with some rationale. Oh yeah, but we can just change that, revoke that. In fact, they just did that for what group? Not Ethiopia. There was a group Venezuelan. They just changed one of those executive orders, got rid of refugee status for Venezuelans who were fleeing a crime-ridden, terrible country. They just got rid of that.
Did you see the video?
Now these people they were legal.
Did you see
now
the
they're
video?
illegal. I don't think I would.
Did you
So
see
let
the
me
video?
ask you. So Phil, you raise a good point. So let me ask the group this question: do you think that the majority of Americans are in favor of having not open borders, but having a process or a system where people can more easily enter the country legally? Do you think more Americans favor
enter
that?
legally, Kevin? You said enter legally. Oh, I
Yeah.
think the majority of
So to
people.
say,
No, I think the
hey, if
majority
we
of people
came
are
up with a
probably
process,
anti-immigrant. To tell you the truth,
And that's what I was going to say.
so you think
I
that?
do.
So you think
I
that?
do. I think people
That the
don't
majority of people in this country are
differentiate.
anti-immigrant.
They are a fair number, maybe a majority are anti-immigrant. Yes, and that's why Trump's and Miller's lines, why those dog whistles, whatever you want to call them, play so well. They're playing into people's, frankly, prejudice against foreigners, particularly those from, as our current president said, pardon my language, shithole countries.
Okay, so I'm just using my analytical sort of logical mind here. So you believe that the majority of Americans don't favor making it easier to get into this country, and hence that's why
I do believe that.
Do we believe in the idea of democracy and majority rules?
Well, actually, not always.
On what
the Constitution is designed to protect minorities, actually, more than majority.
Sure.
More than
but
majority.
I'm just using this as an example. So if that is what the majority of Americans favor, that they and we live in this democracy where people vote and they have an opportunity to weigh in, and the people who win get to make the laws. If people in this country say, hey, we want it to be tougher, it shouldn't be easy to get in America, and here are the laws that we have or the rules that we have for getting in. If that's what the majority of Americans want, then what are we talking about here? It's no different than if a liberal wins and they win, and the majority of people side with something that they want to do. There's a whole lot of people in this country who aren't
Forgive
going to
me for
agree with
using
it,
the
but they got to
slavery
live
thing
with
again,
it.
but
That's
I'll
how
guarantee you there
that's
was
how
a
the
time in this
democracy
country
works.
when the majority of people favored slavery. I'll guarantee it. At some point.
Sure, and guess what? And guess what had to happen? Guess what had to happen? You had to fight a war over it. You had to attack the consciousness of the American people to get them to the point where they elected officials who could then therefore change the law. There was a process that you went through. You had to convince people of this is the right way to go. That's how it works
Started
in a
with
democracy.
resistance.
This stuff didn't happen over this stuff didn't just happen overnight because one day somebody decided like, oh, this is wrong and it changed. No, you had to go through the governmental
But it started
processes
with
to
resistance,
change it.
Kevin. It started with people just like us saying, nah, I ain't going for that. And so that's how this starts right here. But I
Yeah,
want to answer
I
your
mean,
question. You said, you know, it was what would I say to people who are in line? Well, what I would say to the people in line is that you should be more upset with Donald Trump, who killed the deal that would have made you get out of line a lot faster than you should be with the people that came into the country and didn't show up to a court date. And now they're just trying to, be Americans on the low low. The anger and the angst is misplaced. We all mad at people because they want to be Americans and stay here, and the vast majority of them are paying taxes. The vast majority of them are not committing crimes. We should be mad at the politicians
except for
who
the
have
crime
not.
of
We
except
should
for the
be mad
crime
at
of
the
entering the country
politicians.
illegally.
Let me finish. We should be mad at the politicians who haven't come up with the legislation to fix the whole problem. The problem is not necessarily with these individuals.
Nathan,
It's with the
you can't say
politicians.
people who are living here without committing crimes and ignore the fact that the only reason they're here is because they committed a crime.
Yeah,
You
you told
can't
me.
say
You
you
know what?
can't
I'm
say
answering your
people who
question though.
that's just
You
like me
asked
saying,
me,
Nathan, I rob you and I take the money that I took
but we're not talking about being
I
robbed.
parlay it into a fortune. And it's like, oh, well, Kevin took that money and he made all of this money himself, but ignoring the fact that everything I got came from stolen funds. You can't ignore the initial, you
Well, I'm
can't
glad
say
you made that
somebody is not
example. You
guilty
just
of a
kind of made my
crime
point.
when the only reason they're here is because of a crime.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's America. Rockefellers, Kennedys, Trumps, they all made their money with illegal means, but we glorify them. They all did. That's America. Welcome to it. Yeah. Yeah. You got a lot of criminals. They started as crooks and then they got legitimate.
See,
And now
this is the
let me
type
get it
of
out.
MAGA
They
knowledge. This is the
started
same
as
thing that
crooks
MAGA
and
do that you get
criminals,
frustrated about.
and
But
now
what
they're
about is
legitimate.
you're doing exactly
I'm answering
the
your
same thing that
question with your
frustrates
own
you about
example.
MAGA. That is
You're
exactly what
right.
you're doing, Nathan.
That's
That's what they go
America,
to
though,
reach for.
Kevin.
They go to reach for, oh, but look at this. Look at what the Clintons
That's
is doing.
America,
And look
Kevin.
at what Fauci and all of this other crap, man. You
Nah.
just gotta be
You just
consistent, man.
described
You
America,
cannot.
Kevin. That is America. We got a lot of these Kennedys, Rockefellers, Trumps, a lot of these families that we look at and see on TV, and everybody exalts them and reveres them, and they families started as criminals and crooks. So that's America. But getting back to your point, if I'm standing in line right now, I'm mad that Donald Trump killed that deal, because part of that deal was to put like 5, 6, 700 more judges that could clear up the docket. So now that means I'm moving through the line faster. So again, we mad at these people because they want to come in here. They're not committing crimes. Sure, they didn't show up to a court date. It's a whole lot of Americans that don't show up to court dates, right? That ain't the worst thing in the world. They
And
paying
and guess
taxes.
what? If you
The
get
kids
pulled
are going to
over,
our school. They're
but guess what, Nate?
contributing. They're
I'm glad you
contributing.
used that
Let me get it
example.
out,
Because
Kevin.
guess what?
Let me
Guess
get it
what?
out,
And
Kevin.
Phil,
I hear you.
let's get our resident attorney Phil to respond to that. So
He can respond to it, but first let me finish the
Bench
statement, though.
warrant.
if I don't show up for a court date, Phil, if I don't show up for a court date and I get pulled over by the police,
Okay.
what's going to happen to me?
You're absolutely right about that.
Let me
You're absolutely right.
respond. Let me respond.
What's going to happen to me?
But
Phil?
let me finish
I
my
can't
point
answer,
first, and then you
okay.
can respond. So you are absolutely right about the bench. I take that out because you're going to get focused on that. So take that out. I take that out as an example. So these people are here. And if I'm standing in line, going back to what you said, I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at the politicians because they haven't done their job to help me get through the line faster. But go
I
ahead,
was just
Phil.
going to say, if you're asking my legal advice, just remember I'm on the clock. Okay. But
$500
As
hours.
always.
you get what you pay for. You know what you're paying me to do this. But Kevin is correct. If you are, I think
I
if
know
you
he's
skip
correct.
a
I
court
know.
date, you get stopped by a cop. Yeah, you get locked up.
Hey, Phil, absolutely. I made the mistake of bringing that up, and I knew he was going to seize upon that. He was like,
So wait a minute,
aha,
let me get
I
back.
got
Let me get.
something.
There's
So
another.
you're
I'm gonna take it.
absolutely right. You're
I'm gonna
absolutely
take
right.
it even a step further, Nathan,
But
and use your words against you. Because just
come
like them
on with it.
Rockefellers and all of them other people that's
Kennedy's,
corrupt and
Trumps.
getting away with crime, why should I, as a U.S. citizen, if I miss a court date and the police arrest me and they're going to take me to jail, why, as a U.S. citizen, should I be subjected to the law in a way that somebody here who's here illegally is not? So if an illegal misses a court date and he gets arrested, the police should be like, oh, look the other way. But me, the American citizen who paying their taxes, who
I'm
was
not arguing
born in
against
this
that.
country, who has every rights and privilege afforded to me by the Constitution, I
got
gotta
a
go to
question
jail?
for Kevin.
No,
Kevin, I got a
absolutely
question.
not.
Kevin,
Come on, man.
Kevin, I got a
Absolutely
question.
not.
If
Come
you
on,
were,
man.
let me ask you
But
this.
if you're standing
Let
in
me
line,
go. Let
hold
me
on.
off. Where's
So if we're
where's
going
the
to do
free,
this, let's
where's
do it
the
all the way
free
out.
all of the brothers with the warrant movement? That's what I want to
Absolutely
see.
right, 100%. But let me ask you your own question. If you're standing in line right now and you're trying to come into this country, who are you mad at?
I'm mad at everybody. I'm mad at the politicians. I'm mad at the people who are coming across
Everybody
illegally
gets.
Why
and
would
who
you
are
be mad at
getting
the
away
people coming
with it.
across
I'm
illegally?
mad at the whole system because
Why
I'm
would
like,
you be mad at
why
the
y'all
people
can't
who
figure
come
this
across
out?
who's living here illegally? Why would you be mad at them and you're standing in line?
Because I'm standing in line. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to follow the law. I'm trying to do the right thing. And that's what this argument is what it comes down to at the end. When there are processes and things that you have to follow, there's an obligation as a good citizen to
I have a
follow
question
those
for Kevin.
processes.
Can I ask
Unless
Kevin a
it's
question?
slavery.
May I ask Kevin a question?
Unless it's
Kevin,
slavery.
forget about the line. Forget about the line of trying to get in legally. If you are, say, a father, you have a wife, you got kids in whatever country, it could be Guatemala, could be wherever, where your family is terrorized, and this is very, very real, where your family is terrorized on a daily basis by gangs who take your money, rape your daughters, whatever. And this is exactly what happens in these countries. That's why they're all fleeing. If you're that father, would you, if you thought you could make it, and knowing that, let's be honest, trying to go through the process of coming here legally could be years, would you, in that situation, would you try to come in illegally for the benefit of your family?
Yes,
would you?
yes, well, but let me use a similar example for this, which often gets said, and people have no tolerance for that. So there are many families here in America who cannot afford to live. And so there are people who make the decision to sell drugs, to rob and steal, to feed their family. Hey, I gotta feed my family. But guess what? If you get arrested for dealing drugs, you get a prison sentence. If you break into somebody's house or break into a store to feed your family, you're going to jail. So the message that we send is that participating in a criminal act, no matter how desperate you are, is not an excuse for breaking the law. So we want to say, hey, somebody, and I get it. I'm not insensitive to that. I'm not insensitive to the person who said, hey, I had to sell drugs to steal my to support my family. I'm not insensitive to that. But there are a whole hell of a lot of people who are, and who say those people deserve to go to jail and be punished in the crime for that. So my point is if you don't have a problem in sending the father or the mother who had to commit some illegal activity to jail because they were just trying to feed their family, then forgive me if I'm not willing to extend that same grace and latitude to somebody who enters the country illegally.
Yeah, but I would have a problem with that.
Down for the law, or
and I think Kevin,
I would have a problem with that. I mean,
I think a part of Kevin's point is just something that we often come back to, is there is a hypocrisy in almost everything. right? There is a hypocrisy in, and it goes back to the beginning of time, really. You think about it, for those of us that believe in the Bible, right? There are the commandments that are in the Bible. However, some of them we believe in more than others. The Bible doesn't say that, but that's what we've put on it. So we say this particular sin is worse than this one. There is a hypocrisy when we think about the conversation that we're having, because on one side, we have the expectation that we are looking for the law to be followed. And we're looking for those that are responsible for making sure that the law is being abided by to do that. On the other side, there is the answer that, yes, this should happen only if, or this should not happen if. And the challenge is that's the way that it's always been. It's the way that it is right now. If a police stops you, like we were talking about police officers, if a police stops you for speeding, they have a decision. They can make a decision. They can give you a ticket or they can let you go. If they see you in the middle of a crime, depending on what the crime is, they have discretion in how they work with that. So I think that to what Kevin is saying, while it's sensitive for us because it's not something that, again, it goes back to the moral conversation. We don't believe that it's right? We don't believe what's happening right now collectively is just right or the right thing for people. But when we think about just what it is, when we talk about laws versus not, those that are responsible for making certain that the law is followed, that's their responsibility. That's what they are supposed to do. And throughout time, there are scenarios where there were other decisions that they could make. I know we've talked about today we've talked about slavery a little bit, not necessarily the same thing, but I get the point that we're trying to make as we're looking at trying to make that connection. But at the same time, it's hypocritical. Because it can't be both. It can't be either or. We can't say, yes, you do this sometimes, but no, you don't do it other times, even though that's what happens in the real world.
I want to make a point. I want to jump on after her.
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
About the immigration,
right ahead,
when I first started coming on this program, if you all remember, I was talking about immigration in Chicago and how that was going to cost Kamala Harris the race, and you blew me off. And I'll go back to that specific time. Because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's immigration policies were the reason why there was an influx of illegal immigrants. Over 2 million undocumented people came in under their watch. And you're saying, Nathan, to blame Donald Trump. If they wouldn't have opened up the floodgates in specific sanctuary cities, such as Chicago, which was over Chicago, New York, all these places that they just flooded all these immigrants in, thinking and they had a battle going on between Texas governor and DeSantis taking immigrants and dropping them off in Martha's Vineyard and all that little game they were playing with each other. So you're blaming Trump, and I'm blaming. You're right about the politicians, but it can't just say it's blanket Trump's fault. Kamala Harris and Biden opened up the floodgates and let these immigrants in there with false pretenses that they're going to stay there by giving them housing, food stamp cards, all these things that they were getting in Chicago. And getting them used to a certain white lifestyle, taking resources from these black immigrants or black citizens of Chicago who showed up at the polls and made sure that this election went a different way. So y'all, I mean, I know I understand what you guys are saying about that, but these are situations that we could have been talking about 5 months ago in November, but you guys were thinking Kamala Harris was running a great campaign. So you guys as a Democratic Party should go back and take this immigration thing, because what did I kept saying? When Donald Trump's elected, the first thing he's going to do, there's going to be the largest mass deportation in United States history. That's what I kept saying over and over. Y'all like, what is he going to? I said, and that's number one. And that's what's happening. And now you guys are talking about it. I don't understand. I'm like, these are things that you guys caused, or your party.
You know what? I was hoping that when I brought up Donald Trump, it would get to you, bring you out of that corner over here and say something. I'm glad I did it.
Nerd, man.
So, but you know what? The issue, I'm loving this conversation. The issue is not with my brother Kevin. The issue is that, and I thought about this when I was listening to Irnanetta, is that this country is morally flawed, right? So, and that's what the real issue is. So we've been talking about slavery. You could talk about civil rights, where there's images and videos of black and brown people being arrested because they went into whites only restaurants, right? Which was illegal, right? That was morally flawed. So that's where the real issue is. Our country, 'tis of thee, is morally
Yeah.
flawed, and she has promised something that she has not yet and may never yield to its citizens.
Yeah.
And we're here left in the aftermath trying to make sense of all of this stuff,
Can
right?
I share when you
Leveraging
done?
her past. Yeah, absolutely. Leveraging her past and dealing with the consequences in the here and now, and then trying to forge a better future. But that's what it is. So I hear you, bro. But I think the issue comes down to how we view these laws. Like, nobody in here is going to obey a law that they think is morally bankrupt. You're not going to do it. We just disagree about whether this is morally bankrupt or not.
Can
That's
I
what I
share
think
something?
it comes
And
down to.
I don't think the majority. I don't think the majority of people think having a secure border and having a process that people need to follow to enter the country is a morally bankrupt concept. I
But
don't
that's
think
not what I was trying to say at all.
well, no, but wait a minute. You and what you keep missing is that that's where you have to start, because that's where it begins. If we just had open borders and anybody could come across and ingratiate themselves in the country, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But the part of the reason why we're having this conversation is we have rules in this country that this is nothing new. I mean, this is a debate that's been going on for years, hence why you have people who've been in this country 10, 15, 20 years illegally. Okay. And you have to say the person is not illegal, but the act that they committed was illegal, which is coming into this country, either overstaying your visa, either not showing up for a court date when you were supposed to, or just flat out sliding under the fence or whatever, under the watchful eye and getting in and nobody knew you.
Or eating at a white-only diner.
Somewhere along the way, you violated a process,
right,
that was set in place. Now, if you want to tell me that
but I hate that argument though, bro. Because if you take your argument and you apply it to what I just said, you have black and brown
but the difference
people.
is, so I'm asking
what's the
you
difference
the question.
though? It was the process.
So I'm asking you the question: is anything what I just said immoral? Is it immoral to have a policy that says you got to enter the country the right way, that you got to follow these processes to become a citizen?
If you
think that is immoral, you think that is immoral, and the same as enslaving somebody, then I'm gonna let you run with that. I'm gonna let you run with that. If what I just laid out, if you think there's a moral equivalency between what I just said and slavery, I'm gonna let you run with that.
There's absolutely a moral equivalency. You may or may not disagree with this, but the way I see it is that we white people, and that's really who's pushing this immigration thing, don't have the moral authority to steal this country and then hundreds of years later tell us who can and cannot come in. I think that in of itself is wrong and immoral, and they don't really have the right to do it. Now, they have the might to do it, but they really don't have the right to do it. And that's where I stand at. And it's the same white people that stole this land, which was the same white people that enslaved our ancestors. So that's where I see all of these connections. It's
so Nathan,
are you cool?
Are you cool with Al Qaeda operatives?
Here comes the
Taliban operatives, Hamas, whoever. Are you
cool with the worst?
No. You just said that white people and Americans shouldn't have the right to say who can come in and who can't. So following your logic, if this should just be a free for all and whoever wants to come in should, you wouldn't have a problem with those types of individuals coming in and moving in next door to your crib.
Look, I just love the straw man. The most extreme example. You want the terrorists to move right. Listen, this is called a straw man, people. This is called a straw man. He comes up with the most extreme example.
Oh my God.
Can I share? May I share something, please?
They're going to share your apartment. Come on, stop it. Stop the cap, Kevin. Stop it. So no, this country does not have the moral right. It's got the might to steal these lands, and then hundreds of years later come up with all these fancy laws, primarily to protect white people. It's white people moving this.
Can I share something, please?
Absolutely.
First of all, I was going to say I completely agree with you, Nathan. Until you white people stole the land, that kind of pushed me a little too far.
But you did.
And I would
did.
excuse me. You said, I believe the words you said, it's the same white people. No, it's not the same white people. I was not the guy who ran the plantation. So don't say it's the same white people. Okay? But the point that I was going to make, in kind of relation to my friend Kevin, is, I'm reminded a couple weeks ago, I saw my favorite musical for about the 10th time, Les Miserables. Those of you, if you've seen it, it's the most powerful thing I've ever seen on stage, because it's about this guy who spent 20 years in jail for stealing a loaf of bread for his sick son or something. And there's a police officer who insists on hunting him down because that is the law. And what's so powerful about that show is it talks about the balance between law and mercy. And I think, with all due respect, Kevin, I think that you're not really admitting, which I think the fact that there is a balance, and there are times where obeying the law is not the right thing to do. I'll give you one quick story and I'll stop. I remember when I was a prosecutor at juvenile court, there was this kid who was being bullied and beaten up all the time by a bunch of guys. And so he finally, after all this, he takes a knife with him to protect him. And these guys start coming toward him, okay? Well, he stabbed one of them, and the case that I had was he was charged with felonious assault for having stabbed this guy. And I don't think it met the self-defense criteria. And you guys may think, and I looked at all this, and I decided, I think justice was done here. So I dismissed the case. And did I technically follow the law? No. But was justice done? I think so.
Yeah, I'll just say this, and I'll take it to the point where we started this from. And so, again, I'm probably more on your guys' side actually than the side that I'm arguing.
So you're admitting you're being the devil's advocate. That's what you're admitting.
No. No. Everything that I'm saying,
it's a matter of speech.
Yeah, no, everything that I'm saying, I actually believe. But I would also say that there's a part of me that also recognizes what you're saying about mercy and discretion and all of those sorts of things. I guess at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that if we're going to say that we are a nation of laws, that we are a nation of law and order, that I just think that it's a bad message to say that, and then to say to law enforcement, which is where we began this conversation, that you should not follow the law. That, to me, I mean, there goes the whole ball of wax right there. And I am not a super fan of giving wide discretion to police officers, because I've seen how police officers use and sometimes abuse discretion. They'll let somebody, again, I love bringing this back to Phil and the whiteness that we always get. They'll let somebody like Phil go, but they'll let somebody like Phil go, but they'll choke somebody like me out. So look, I'm not a super fan of this notion of wide discretion, for police officers. I get it. I get why we need it, but I'm not a huge fan of it because I've seen how it's been abused, and most often not in the favor of people who look like me. So I just think we got to be careful about this notion about these conversations that we have about law enforcement and not enforcing the law. Now, we're having a political, philosophical conversation about what the laws should be. Okay. And that is worthy of debate. That's the politics that we're talking about here. That's why we hold elections, to elect lawmakers who are going to make the laws that we feel are just. Right now, you're on the losing end of that. And right now, you got some lawmakers in Columbus who are saying this is going to be the law. And it's not so far outside of the realm of, again, that's why I just refuse to get into this conversation about comparing what we're talking about here to slavery, because there was no criminal act the slave committed to wind up in slavery. You were against your will forced into a situation that was morally wrong.
Yeah. But when you ran, that was the criminal act we've been talking about.
Sure. And they paid the price. They paid the punishment. And many were beaten, many were killed, they returned to captivity. I'm not saying that it was right. I absolutely believe that it was immoral. But I'm saying in those days, those was the law. And guess what they did? They enforced the law until it wasn't the law anymore.
Right.
So my thing is, if there really are a majority of Americans who feel the way that we're saying that we feel, and this is immoral, why didn't that argument win? Why didn't that argument win in this last election? Because immigration was a key issue. And that argument that y'all making today ain't the one that won.
And the last thing I'll say on this, I can't help but see David Whitehead's comment in the chat. And the again, thinking about hypocrisy, I think the hypocrisy of it all is we're talking about a person that's a felon, right? We're talking about the person that is putting these things in place or signing executive orders to hammer the law, is a person that is a felon, that has released all of these individuals that were involved in an insurrection for our country. So, I don't want to jump into that part, but I think I would be remiss if we didn't elevate that, because that becomes the greater concern. And this is, as we know it, this is the person that our country voted for. And so to Phil's point earlier.
But you know what he did? He didn't beat the law. He beat the politics. That's what Trump did. The law did its job. The law convicted him on 34 felony counts, but the politics saved him. The law was going to get him, but the politics
it's still hypocritical.
Right? It was. You can't look at the law and say the law didn't do what it was supposed to do. The law did what it was supposed to do. The politics.
And then can I jump on what Kevin just said too?
There's still hypocrisy in it. Still hypocrisy. So when you go back to Phil's question, when you go back to Phil's comment earlier about whether or not the majority of the country would agree with individuals being removed from the country or not coming in, and the answer to that becomes yes, right? Even if you're coming in by legal means, within that, you're talking about somebody that is dealing in hypocrisy across the board already. So it's a unique conversation to have.
You guys are right about the hypocrisy, and I just want to say, and you guys are absolutely right. And I want to hammer this in one more time. The felonies that he got on his record, the felonies that you guys are talking about, 34 felonies, Donald Trump and his newly appointed staff believed that was the DOJ and Merrick Garland was improperly targeted him for those felonies.
That was New York City. It wasn't the federal government.
Let me finish. That's the way Donald Trump believes. And the more that you guys keep bringing up his felonies and felonies and felonies, which are going to be completely erased and all that kind of stuff, I feel like you guys are distracted and off course when y'all talk about how did a felon get in the White House when he's in the White House? And the more that y'all keep bringing up, to me, in my opinion, the more y'all keep bringing up, how did y'all let a felon get into the White House? And y'all keep bringing that up. He's going to weaponize the DOJ, especially when Kash Patel gets confirmed. He's going to use that same energy that the Merrick Garland used to get those charges, those felony charges on him, to weaponize them against anybody he chooses, because that's the politics of the game.
Kash, you're confusing two courts. Just for the record, the federal charges, and by the way, Merrick Garland, pardon my language, was a complete pussy, because he could have, if he had brought those charges when they happened a year or two earlier, Trump probably would be in jail now, and deservedly so. Okay, but he had cold feet and waited, and finally, after the January 6th committee, then he did something, and it was too late. But just so you're clear, the charges that he was convicted on had nothing to do with the Justice Department, nothing to do with Merrick Garland. They were New York State charges brought by New York State, officials.
And there's record.
He cannot be federally pardoned for those. And frankly, there's nothing he can do to get rid of those charges. I'm just making those details clear.
Okay. So Letitia James and Fannie Willis, they were all in collusion all together. There's records of signing in to the White House and seeing Kamala. Come on, man. It's not rocket science to put these pieces of the chess puzzle together. That Donald Trump can make the argument that the Department of Justice colluded all of these charges to attack him. He has been the most. So, and I'm not taking up for Trump in any because I'm not a big Trump fan, but you guys are delusional sometimes that you don't think that the same energy that was taken to Donald Trump, he's not going to use against the same energy. He's going to match energy, and he's weaponized.
He's already doing it.
Every
You saw the whole
confrontation
list
is
of
being
stuff he's looking to
confirmed.
get rid of. That's already started.
So the fact that y'all keep bringing up that we can't believe that we got a felon in office, he's in office, and guess what? He's been in office before. I don't understand the fear. That's what I'm trying to wrap my hand around. I'm walking around here in everyday life. People are scared for their lives, and I'm like, why? Am I missing something? And the only fear that I can see is the fear that is going on in everybody's head.
No, I think the fear is that Donald Trump is a fool. He's reckless. I mean, that's the fear straight behind it. I mean, I think what we're talking about today, like, is there are a lot of people who are afraid that he's going to
but he wasn't an
carry out
autocrat.
these mass deportations that he's taking out. Look, the reality is Trump did what he did. There's more than enough evidence. He was convicted by a jury of his peers, not the Department of Justice. And so Trump did what he did. He was guilty on that. Here's the thing that I will say when I say the politics saved him. The politics saved him in what Phil said in that Merrick Garland, to trying for whatever reason and trying to avoid looking political or whatever, drug his feet for 2 years on the investigation. The politics of it was Joe Biden should have fired Merrick Garland like Donald Trump would have done and got somebody else in there who wasn't going to drag their feet. And Joe Biden didn't do that. One of the many failures, Joe Biden was a good president, but he did some stuff that he messed a lot of stuff up by not necessarily having to go for the jugular that I will say Donald Trump has in a negative way. And I think that the Democrats need to get a little bit more of that in their game instead of always trying, well, we don't want to appear. Look, man, the American public knows what's going on. Politics is a part of all of it. So you might as well go ahead and do what you're going to do and do it but do it in the interest of what is best for the American people, which would have been not dragging your feet on this. So I will hit Joe Biden upside the head, one,
but you also got to hit Obama
for not doing what he should have did with Merrick Garland when Merrick Garland was over there messing up, and then Merrick Garland for not doing what he should have done in that position to go ahead and prosecute Donald Trump. That's what I mean by the politics saved him. The politics saved him by a judge that he appointed using the system, again, using what the law allowed to delay and drag things out to a certain point. The politics saved him. And then even after they got the conviction, him winning the election allowed them to say they're not going to send a sitting president to jail, because even if they had tried to do that, he would have pardoned himself. So the law didn't fail. The politics saved him.
I would say the same thing about Obama. Near the end of his term, his Justice Department got a lot of information that there was Russian collusion with elements of the Trump
campaign.
He
played it too safe. You're right.
They did the same thing. He played it too safe. And I'm like, look, if you have evidence, you got evidence. It don't matter what people think about it. You follow the evidence. If
he was
somebody
too nice, is what you're saying, right? He was too nice.
Period. It was too nice. That was too nice. And that's something that doesn't get said tonight. Biden was too nice in terms of not trying to appear to be political. Obama was too nice in terms of not trying to appear to be too political. And we are where we are right now. This whole Trump thing could have been derailed at the very beginning. But, I think Kevin's right. Politics.
And that's a shame that we're saying these as criticisms of Barack Obama and Joe Biden, because that's the way that it should be.
Right.
But that ain't the field we playing on these days. So you gotta be a little bit less nice and a little bit more, hey, bully in the schoolyard on some of this stuff, because if you don't, you're going to get bullied and get ran over, because the cat on the other side of the fight ain't playing by the same rules that you're playing on. So it's a shame that we got to look at the statesmanship and whatever that these guys tried to conduct themselves in. We look at that now as a weakness when it should be a virtue, when in actuality it should be a virtue. But unfortunately, That is not the field that we're playing on. And I think that I'm not saying Democrats have to abandon entirely their the moral high ground, but I think there's sometimes where you gotta be willing to get down in the dirt and fight. And Democrats are still too high-minded on some stuff, and then wonder why they get their brains beat out in some instances.
I think, you know what I
That's
think?
why.
I think that little by little, show by show, my barbarian genes are rubbing off on y'all. I can hear me.
Just so you know,
you,
I don't consider
and I
that a
like it.
compliment.
I hear. Oh, it's very much a
Yeah,
compliment.
maybe you,
I can
Hey,
hear
man,
a
I-
bit of me
think
in
it's a
you, and I
compliment.
like it.
Maybe you do.
Oh, it absolutely is. The world is going to tell you it's a compliment. When you tap into your inner barbarian, the whole world is going to look differently. It's like the first night of being a vampire.
Well, we started
man,
with Transylvania, and we're
Hey,
ending
listen,
with
the
vampire,
next-
you know?
Yeah, she gets me.
The
She
next
gets me. She see
podcast,
me
I'm going to be
working.
wearing that hat that Jaden Smith had. I'm going to be wearing that hat.
Oh, that would be dope. I would give you
I
a lot
bet
of
you
points
would.
for that if you did that.
Hey, man, I got my new nickname,
Which is
the Barbarian, because somebody said they felt like terrorists had poured it into my body. I seen that in the chat, and now you saying that some of the barbarianism is rubbing off on me, so I'm the Barbarian. That's what I am.
Barbarian. Okay.
Barbarian.
Hey, that works too. That works too. So let's move on. Last topic. Another local topic here, but it's got some national implications. It's been reported that Trump might investigate University of Cincinnati in terms of their efforts to eliminate DEI. So apparently, this guy put down an edict and said, "Look, any colleges that have an endowment of over $1 billion, I want you to look at what they're doing to see if we can come up with any court cases to come after them for DEI." Like, he has instructed his people to come up with at least 8 to 9 cases potentially that they can try to come after these universities. So it looks like the University of Cincinnati is on the radar screen. I just want to get your thoughts about this. Like, how far are we going with this anti-DEI thing? Now you got the federal government pushing down upon people. I've yet to see any data that white people are somehow being harmed by DEI. I don't know if that data exists. I thought we were data-driven people. No, I didn't. We're emotionally driven people. I know better than that. But I'd love to see some data. I guess there is none that says that somehow white people are on the bottom or white men don't have enough money. In all the charts and statistics I look at, I see white men at the very top. Wealth, C-suite, property, value, income, and every level, I see white men at the top. So
Guys
I'm
like Phil
confused,
Heimlich is
kinda
what you're
not
saying,
really.
right?
I was waiting for you to comment.
Yeah,
Phil.
Phil Heimlich. I didn't want to put you out
I
there.
need to
Iron
see
Man
his
was
tax
going to defend me,
returns.
by the way, when you
Still got to
mentioned my
bring his
name. I
tax
could sense
returns
that.
on the show.
Yeah, Mr. $2,000 an hour. Just to
Yeah,
talk.
I'm gonna need to see Phil's tax returns,
Hey,
baby. I need to see
I'm
them
an
turn
open
them
book
over.
guy.
You,
You can have my
hey,
tax return.
hey, you want the American people to see Trump's tax returns, Phil? I think the hot mic crowd needs to see your
help
tax
yourself. Help yourself. I'm an open book.
But what are we dealing with here, guys? I mean, so now I'm hearing that, as they should be, people are now alarmed at the University of Cincinnati. What's your take on this?
I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as Kentucky, I want to congratulate. I talked about Kentucky earlier. I want to congratulate Kentucky again because we were amongst the forefront. I can remember being on TikTok lives in 2023 early, and they were debating something. I was like, "Do you understand?" They were talking to me, calling me names, disparaging name. I was like, "Look, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna blow y'all's mind." I was like, "Today in the House in Kentucky, they just passed where they're about to eliminate DEI from all universities." And they looked at me and they're like, same stuff I get all the time. I'm proud of Kentucky, especially the university I went to school. I got my degree from is Northern Kentucky University. They eliminated DEI probably when they got the new president in. And I'm like, good, get it out of here because it doesn't benefit black people at all. We're at the bottom, the very bottom of DEI. So why are we arguing and we so fast in our community? White women are at the top of the DEI at the DEI all the time. All the time, DEI, white women are top. Black men, let's talk about my passion. Black men, bottom, most incarcerated, worst education. We are at the absolute bottom. Why do we care if DEI? If we're at the absolute bottom, get rid of it and let's start something completely over. Let's start something completely over. Why are we caping for these people? I got a 30-second thing. Gloria Sessions, I think her name was. She was a CIA operative back in the 60s, and she had this magazine, and she went and got black women to the feminist movement when she brainwashed people to believe what she got, and then she got black women on there as long with her. And then when the white women get older, they go off and marry Chet and Brad and Lance, and black women are left out there by themselves because the black men is taken away from them by single mothers and all that kind of stuff. And it all goes back to this affirmative action that we have not benefited from since 1964. We need to tear it all down and restart it over. And as long as we keep playing we shall overcome politics and not getting involved and getting our seats at the table to some people who are really going to make a difference and push a thing, we still going to be at the DNC singing Negro spirituals. It's get rid of DEI. Get it out of here.
Well, see, now I gotta say, because Taurus, I mean, that all of it sounds, it just sounds a little delusional to me. And the reason that it does is because it's about the same conversation that we had earlier. The misconception is that DEI only means black, or it only means minority. When we're talking about equity, we're talking about giving those what they need, giving people what they need based on what they need. It has nothing to do with race. So when you're talking about individuals, you're talking about individuals that have handicaps, that you're talking about individuals that can't get in a regular bathroom. So because they can't get in a regular bathroom, they need a larger bathroom in the area where they are. That's equity as well. We take all of those things and lump them together and only make them about black. And that's not what it's about. The other thing that it's about, who would not want a place? Well, I know who doesn't, but just thinking about it, for those that deal in rational, that is diverse with people, that we think about the people that are a part of it, not all one sex, not all one race, not all one nationality. You have an environment that is open to other individuals. That's diversity. Equity, giving people what they need based on what they need, and then including everyone. Who wouldn't want that? So instead, what we're doing, and I think I saw this as well, and I've seen it somewhere before, we think about it the same way that we think about the original conversation around affirmative action. And all that people can come up with is that because of affirmative action, this person was qualified for the job, they didn't get the job, and somebody else got that job because they were black, which we also know is not accurate, but that was the way that the conversation started. So the reality is now is that anybody that is black or brown, primarily black, that gets a position, they're getting that position because of their color. Doesn't matter about their experiences. It doesn't matter about the other work that they've done. It's just the fact that they are black. Like the asinine comment that was made around the plane crash last week. Like these individuals, all of a sudden, this had to be a DEI hire. And it's incensing and it's enraging because it's so far-fetched and so far from the truth. So what I really wish that we could do as a people is agree that DEI is not just about being black. DEI is not just about minorities, so that when these other things begin to happen and you see other opportunities that are being removed from people or other resources that people need being taken away from them, that too is removing DEI.
Let me rebuttal on that one real quick. Let me rebuttal just for 30 seconds. When she talked about DEI, and I agree with you 100%. I don't believe that DEI is being attacked by black people. Look, and you're talking about the plane crashes and how they attack DEI. They are definitely, when we talk about script writers right now, and we talk about who I always talk about, Dana White, and these script writers are writing the script. Buttigieg was their target with the FFA. Buttigieg was their DEI. That's who they were targeting. They didn't. That's why I don't understand why black people are so up in arms about DEI, because it doesn't affect us. Let's come with something different. They're not going after. You're saying that, but
and it affects you too, even though you don't realize it.
Let me just say this. It absolutely does impact. It absolutely does impact us, particularly on the federal level. When you think about it, I don't even know these if these statistics are exactly right, but they're close. I think black people are like 19% of the US population, they're roughly 18% of all federal jobs. And many of these are federal jobs that Donald Trump is trying to eliminate under the guise of DEI. And those are black jobs. I ain't talking about minority jobs. I'm talking about black jobs.
Right.
So when you talk about Donald Trump eliminating DEI at the federal level, you're talking about literally hundreds to thousands of black people who are going to have their jobs eliminated. So DEI absolutely affects black people. Okay. The other thing that I would say is that, and we often get into this conversation with Phil about what DEI is versus what affirmative action is, or quote unquote racial preferences. So if you look at even how UC described their Office of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion, I forget what the official name of it was, but this is what their department does. They do recruitment, retention, and training and support services to help sure that students of diverse backgrounds are successful. Now, there's nothing in that says that unqualified students are being led into the University of Cincinnati and getting in for something that they don't deserve. What it says is we want to make sure that our recruitment efforts, so that our campus is diverse, because we understand that it is critical to the learning environment that we have a broad range of students on our campus who represent the plethora of what our communities are. And we want those to be the best of the best students. We just want it to be diverse students. That's important. That we want to make sure that we recruit them, that we retain them, and that we put things around them to help them be successful. Now, why would anybody have a problem with that?
Why isn't it working?
It says nothing about racial preferences or quotas. That language is not mentioned. Huh?
Why are we last? Why is it not working? Why are we dead last? Why? If it's working, I would say, yeah, let's keep it. But we are dead last. Black men are dead last in almost every category. Socioeconomically, we are most incarcerated.
There's a lot of reasons for that. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. When you look at the poor quality of schools that most black children find themselves in, when you look at the school to prison pipeline, where you got more black men in jail than you got in college, that explains why we're kind of at the bottom. So there are a lot of societal reasons why we're at the bottom of a lot of those.
But why are we going to keep the things? Why are we going to keep these labels on it? It ain't got nothing to do with us getting preferential treatment. If it's not working, why? What's wrong with getting rid of it and finding something else that does work?
But that's the same.
It's not working for me. It's not working for people who look like me. It's not working for
I bet it worked for a whole lot of people in your family before you. I bet it worked for a whole lot of people in your family before you.
And the other thing about that is
me specifically, and let's not get this twisted. I'm not talking about me specifically because I'm okay. I'm talking about black men in America. We are dead last. And y'all are talking about, y'all are like talking about, what are we going to do? Why are we going to, let's tear it down and fix it right. Let's start with family courts, get these family courts right. Let's get these parents, these dads back in these kids' lives. Let's start working on that. Let's start educating our kids at home and getting the federal government out of kind of stuff. Let's start working on root problems with black men instead of like thinking about DEI.
But why does it have to be either or? Why can't we do both?
And the other part about that,
let's put the energy on that instead of DEI. But DEI doesn't even affect black people that we don't benefit the most from something. Why are we caping so hard for it? Why do we cape so hard for white people? I don't understand.
Because we benefit from it.
Oh, because you get advantages from caping for white
because
people.
we benefit from it.
But you get
anybody that's not a traditional.
Who says that we have to benefit the most to benefit from it?
That's right.
We benefit the least. We're the biggest cheerleaders. We're the biggest cheerleaders. We're the emotional cheerleaders. We push presidents over the top. And what do we get in return? More nothing burgers. We need to push the envelope for tangibles. Let's get rid of DEI. And everybody's like, all right, black people, black people all get online and say, we don't need DEI. What you got for us? What do you have for us? We don't want the DEI. We're not benefiting from it anyway. Let's get the buzzwords out of there because the DEI is nothing but a buzzword. It's nothing but
So
a
let me
buzzword. Let's
break
get that
this
out
to
of
you.
there.
Let me break this to you, Terrence, and I'm gonna say this in the least racially offensive way that I can. First of all, even in the Democratic Party, true, black votes may put them over the top, but you still ain't the majority. Both of these parties are still, still mostly whites dominated. So using your line of wait, let me finish. Using your line of logic, if I'm a white person, why am I going to support any project that don't benefit me the most? So
if you're a white person, you can say,
finish, Terrence. I love to use y'all own line of logic against you. So you saying as a black person, if it don't benefit us the most, we shouldn't support it. Then you ain't gonna never get nothing done, because nothing done is gonna ever benefit black people the most. You know why? Because white folks is in the majority, and they gonna make sure that they benefit more than anybody.
And
So
since 1964, since
kind of
1964 in the
no
civil
kind of
rights movement, the
in
Democratic
America,
Party
in
has been
these United
stringing
States
along
of
black people
America, where
with
black
this
people are
exact
the
same
primary
argument. The
beneficiaries,
same
bro. It ain't
argument that
gonna
you're
happen.
using, Kevin, the Democratic Party has been using the same argument that you're using right now with me since 1964, and black people are in worse situations now than we were
Nope,
in
that's a lie.
1964 before the
That's a
civil
lie.
rights. We're
That's a
fatherless
lie.
No, we're
homes,
not.
That's a lie.
We got less fatherless homes. We got more mothers raising kids, grandparents and raising kids. Before the
I
Civil
don't
Rights Act, we
understand
had
your
fathers in the
juxtaposition to
home.
that to DEI. That
Because
goes
it's
back
all
to the
because the
delusion. I
white
don't
people
understand.
because white
The
supremacy.
juxtaposition to
Let me tell you.
DEI. So it sounds like there needs to be more research done around that part of it, because I can guarantee you, in some of the circles that you are in, you have benefited as well. Now I'm going to go research it, and then I'll come back to you and talk to you about it, because I'm sure that you
black
have,
men,
even though you don't believe that you
13%.
have.
With black men, if in the United States of America, black people are 13%, black men are like 7%. Why are we 70% or 80 more incarcerated? Why are black men taking the blunt of this everything? And then whenever we stand up, we're supposed to stand up and say, black women especially, here, help us out.
None of
Let's work
that has
together. We
anything
are
to do
still
with
None.
getting put
DEI,
down
though,
at the
Terrence.
bottom. We are still at the
None.
bottom. So when I say
Terrence, listen, that's a fair question. And if you really are serious about that, that's a very fair question. But none of that has anything to do with
Yes, it does.
DEI.
to you,
I'm
let's
not
get
even
rid
going
of
to
it.
give you the
Let's get rid
space
of it.
to say that DEI has not been successful. To my knowledge and experience on a multitude of different levels for a whole lot of people, not just black
Right.
people, and including white people in Fortune 500 companies, DEI has been successful.
Here's
It's hard to
the
argue
It's been
against
fallacy.
that.
successful for white
Here's what
people.
Terrence,
And if white
doesn't
people, they're like, okay,
understand.
white people
Here's
say,
what
okay, we're
Terrence
going to give
doesn't
DEI, but we're
understand
going to give
about
it
the
to our wives.
ridiculousness of
We're
what
going to give
he's
it to our
saying.
wives and our sisters. We're not going to give it to black people.
Here's the
We're going to give it to our
ridiculousness
wives, our
of what
sisters, our
Terrence doesn't
cousins.
realize
Come
about
on,
what he's
man.
saying about DEI. He suffers from
Nepotism.
Clarence Thomas syndrome. Okay, he suffers from Clarence Thomas syndrome
That is the ultimate
in his
That's
reluctance
below
to
the belt.
understand. He wants to criticize the same programs and processes that allowed him to be where he is. Clarence Thomas is a beneficiary of affirmative action. He's a beneficiary of affirmative action. He's only where he's at because he's standing on the shoulders of Thurgood Marshall. That's the only reason why Clarence Thomas is where he is on the United States Supreme Court. But what happens to too many black men who get a little something is they seem to think that somehow or another they were outside of the racial bubble, that they were allowed to achieve some success. Brother, I'm here to tell you that DEI worked for you. It worked for me. It worked for Irnanetta. It worked for Nathan Ivey. It worked for everybody who's had black skin, because we all stand on the shoulders of these programs that allow black people to come from Jim Crow and slavery, and where the government was forced to recognize our talents and abilities and give us an opportunity and a chance. And that's all DEI is. And to say that DEI has done nothing for black people or still isn't doing anything for black people, you are drinking the colorblind society Kool-Aid that they want you to drink, to think that, oh, if we just didn't talk about race, oh, if you just didn't bring this up, these things would naturally and organically take care of themselves. No, they won't. For exactly the reason that I just said to you. White folks won't say this to you, but they're never going to allow themselves, as long as they are in power, to not be on top. They're not. They're not going to allow you.
So the Democratic Party.
They're not
So
going to
you
let you
guys
be
in the
on
Democratic Party, y'all going to just be whatever they tell you to do, we're going to take it. Oh, whatever
Hey,
y'all say,
the Democrats ain't
whatever
telling me
crumbs
that
they
because
get.
I'm smart enough. I can see with my own eyes, terrorists. And that,
But
unfortunately,
DEI
too
is
many of y'all
gone.
Republican brothers, y'all drinking that
DEI is gone.
Republican Kool-Aid, and you ain't using your brain. I can look at my own eyes and see through my own experience, and I can just simply look out at the world, as Nathan said. As Nathan said, if things were so fair, even with DEI, terrorists, so even with DEI, okay, let's just say DEI is the monster that some would have you believe where black people, unqualified black people, are getting things that they don't deserve. Then why are so many of the CEOs in this country white? Why? Why don't we have more black? So if white men are losing, who's winning? Because it sure ain't us. Because everywhere I look around, the people who calling the shots are mostly white. So where is this fictitious narrative coming from that somehow white men or white people are being discriminated against and they're losing? Because I don't see it, and you know what? They don't see it either. It's a boogeyman.
I'm not saying they're losing. I'm not saying white people are losing. I'm saying black men are last, dead last. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying black men are dead.
That's not true.
Last.
I don't even think that's true. I don't even think that's true. I need to see some stats on that.
I'm gonna say two more things on this, and then I'm not gonna say anything else about this. Number one, so starting from your logic, Terrace, the playing field wasn't level to start with. So the whole goal and the desire has been to try to level the playing field, even though that has not necessarily happened. That's number one. But number two, I have to say again, DEI is not just about black people. It is not just about race. Race is a part of it, but race is not all of it. So when we start thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are talking about anybody that is not your standard. And I know Phil is quiet through this conversation. He's going to let us have at it, and I get it. But we're talking about anybody that is not your white male. It really is anybody else, because those were the individuals, and still are, that run the country. So when you talk about that, you're still making it specific to black. And it's much, much bigger than that. And that is my concern with the entire DEI conversation, because it has, and I posted this last week, it consistently is taken back and is being used synonymously with only black. And DEI is not just about being black. It is about diversity. It is about trying to level the playing field for people that the playing field is not already level for them. And I use the example of a person that is handicapped being able to park closer to the door. That is an equity movement. And that has nothing to do with somebody that's black.
I'm glad you said that. Absolutely. I made the same point. There's so many different things and people, Americans. Like you said, that's equity. Just being able to get out of your car and not have to walk all the way through the parking lot because, you're dealing with a physical, disability or some type of injury. I mean, it's so much deeper than that. It really is. But I wanted to ask you, Irnanetta, like, it's kind of slightly shifting our conversation about DEI and talking about immigration just a little bit is, I read this past week that there was a 10% drop with the CPS attendance because, as it was reported, there was a lot of fear from parents about what's going to happen if my kid goes to school. Are the police going to show up? If you were still, doing a soup job here in the city of Cincinnati, how would you address that? Like, what would you be thinking? Like, kind of take us into the leadership and what are the options? What are they dealing with?
I'll tell you what I know superintendents are thinking about across the country, because I'm in conversations with them all the time. And last week, I remember one of the superintendents that I speak with who said, I think I'm done. I post quite a bit, as some of you all follow me. And this whole immigration faux pas right now is just like superintendents and district leaders felt during COVID. And it's not the same thing, but follow the logic for just a minute. COVID was the thing that took a lot of leaders, and I'm talking specifically school leadership, superintendents, principals, it took them over the edge because it became so much about politics that we couldn't get to the point of trying to really determine how we were going to work with our children, how we were going to educate our children in something that all of us were trying to figure out. trying to figure out how to exist through. Now superintendents and school principals are being put in a position where in some instances you're almost in battle with your with your local government in some instances, but definitely with the federal government. So if you have states, and many of our school, and I heard you talk about Chicago, Taurus, but many of our states have had a large number of individuals that have come in as immigrants over the years. It does not mean that all of them are illegal, but they might be immigrants, and there is a fear. I spoke with a principal this morning that called me in tears, not from Cincinnati, but called me in tears because in one of her classes, 9 of her students are there. Most of the students are ELL students, and 9 of the students are in school out of about 33 kids that should be in that location because they're afraid. They're afraid that someone is going to come to them and say that you have to leave. I don't know that there's a lot of fear about them being arrested in school. But last week I had another principal that was talking to me about an escape plan that they're trying to determine for their kids in case someone comes to get them. And that again was not in Cincinnati. So I think the important part is it is a very it's a thin line that you can walk on. I applaud any school district and any leadership that says we're going to protect our kids, right? We're going to give them cover in the space where we are. We want to make sure that we're taking care of them. That's what we should do. But to the point that Kevin was talking about earlier about law enforcement, at some point that's also it could be putting yourself in harm's way. And that's a decision that schools should not be having to make right now, especially when we're talking about dealing with the federal government. There's enough to do in schools already. So yes, I would believe that you're going to see, we're trying to, I say we collectively, leaders are trying to encourage parents, to tell them that things will be well, to let them know what their recourses are, to have private meetings with them, to let them know how to get to those that can help them with immigration or immigration attorneys and all of those things. But at the end of the day, to get to that point, something has already had to happen. Last point I'll make, in one district that I was in last week, across the street from the school, ICE agents were across the street. There's a large population of students in that school that English is their second language. Many of them were born in the country, but English is their second language. So they may not be looking for them, but they're looking for their parents to see whether or not they're legal. And we're not talking about people right now that have records or all of those other things that we've talked about all day. So it just puts leaders, and then most of the guidance that's being provided to school districts, because that is the person that leads the school, and most of the guidance that's being provided to school districts, if the guidance is saying, make sure that you reach out to your local police or make sure that you engage with your school's police department or any of that, it goes back to the principal. So who is put there? The principal is the one that's put in that position as the leader of the school to then do something to make decisions. And parents are fearful. And to say to them that they should not be fearful, you really can't say that, but you can say to them, which I believe has been done in our city. I know it's been done in some other cities as well, but to say to them that we're going to do what we can to protect you. We want you here and we want to keep you covered at the time that you're with us.
And how do you think this is going to impact education?
I think that we're going to see if you have to disaggregate the data. You can't clump it all together. We've already across the country had an issue with chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism has been up across the country since the pandemic. We have not collectively figured out how to get students back in school since the pandemic. So that's already an issue. And the pandemic started in 2020. So that's already an issue. The second piece of that, however, is when you continue to hear this every day, and some people may say it's rhetoric, but you're hearing something about ICE, about immigration, about race. You're hearing something every day somewhere. And that is the fear. When we say, what are people afraid of? People are afraid because they're hearing these things every day. And then you get other people that say, oh, no, that's not true. And then individuals have proof of where that's happened. So I think that we're going to continue to see an increase in crime and absenteeism. I think we have to disaggregate the data so that we know whether or not it's our students that identify with being from a different country or not. Because again, every person that speaks Spanish, and I'm just going to use that one because that's what we're hearing about the most. Every person that speaks Spanish was not necessarily born somewhere else. So they're not here illegally, but that's what they're feeling right now. Like people are going to come to me first, or there is a fear for my family. So I think that we're going to continue to see an increase in absenteeism within that population. I think one of the things that school districts can continue to do is look at, just until things can pipe down a bit, right? We don't know. We hope that there will become a lull, right? After the excitement of it all happens, hopefully there'll become a lull. In the meantime, look at opportunities to give students virtual opportunities to log on, to be engaged with teachers, to really still have their teachers working with them. Give teachers the opportunity to work with students. Let them engage in class as much as possible virtually, so that they don't get so disconnected from what's happening across their school and their school environment, because then they also get farther and farther and farther behind. And we know that collectively, the pandemic showed us that virtual learning for the average population of students was not as successful for them as we wanted it to be. But giving them something is better than nothing. Giving an opportunity to go into their homes or in their communities to provide support for them as well.
And how does chronic absenteeism impact the
Yeah.
school building? Because I'm thinking it's not just on the individual's family. Is there some other impact that we don't talk enough about on the system and teachers and
Absolutely. Well, I
administrators?
think the first thing that we think about is chronic absenteeism is defined as a student being absent from school at least 10% of the school year. So in most school districts, that's right around 180 days. Some school district is 170, others is 180, but it's usually, so a student that is absent more than 17 or 18 days out of a year is considered chronically absent, regardless of what the absence is for. So that's the first, to just think about what that definition means. In some states, there are penalties that go along with funding for students, for students getting funding, for school districts getting funding based on students and students' membership, or whether or not they're in school and enrolled in school and present in both FTE periods, or both periods where students are counted. That's how it works in some school districts. So there is the funding part of it. The other part, though, when we think about really still trying to recover students, right, from what they lost during the changes in the pandemic and all of those things, teachers can't teach kids that aren't in school. Right. And so if the kids aren't there, or if they're there inconsistently, it impacts the information that they're getting and how they're getting that information. We always talk about a summer slide, which is the time from the school year ending to the time the new school year starts, and what happens during that summer slide. So you're always looking at how you're going to continue to provide support to students or help them engage with academic achievement, academic activities during that time to keep them, engaged in schoolwork. So with students that are chronically absent throughout the year, that you look at the amount of time that they are missing, the amount of instructional time and hours that they are missing, and they're trying to continue to be productive.
Hey, Phil, any thoughts? It looks like the federal government is going after DEI at the University of
Yeah.
Cincinnati. I know you're not a big DEI
Yeah,
fan.
well, interestingly enough, I am submitting a opinion piece to the Cincinnati Enquirer on DEI. But if any of you have any connections with anybody in the editorial department, encourage them to publish it. Okay? All right.
Rejected.
Wait, sir, what was that?
Nothing. I nothing.
Some of you may have some influence. I don't know, but a couple of things that I say in this piece. One, to answer Nathan's frequent question, is I do include specific data about racial and gender preferences in the Cincinnati Police Department that occurred until 2021. So I think I'm pretty specific there to answer your point. But one of the things that I focused on is that DEI means different things. A lot of times, Kevin and others on this program will say it's casting a wider net. It's making sure we, shall we say, either recruit or at least make sure we include a pool. And my position is that's 100% right. And there's not only nothing wrong with that, it's going to produce a better qualified employee because you have a wider pool. The other side of DEI, though, is racial and gender preferences. Now, the Supreme Court has said very clearly these racial preferences are unconstitutional. And that's the way it is. Now, I also happen to feel, as I've said before on this program that I don't think they're a good thing, because it goes against the values our country is supposed to be built on. And as I've said many times, where does it end? Okay, how much does one group need an advantage for how many years? It's just where does it end? But here's the thing with what Trump's doing. See, Trump is lumping all of this together. He's lumping it together and kind of making people feel like it's all racial preferences. Okay, that's why he talks, we're going to have a merit-based. He's lumping it together. The reason he's able to pressure, which he is, colleges and universities to get rid of their whole DEI program is because of the fact that these colleges are all hooked on federal money. Okay? And so he can say, you either get rid of, and I'm talking about the wider net, you get rid of all your DEI or I'm pulling this money. And actually, I happen to agree with like Hillsborough College and maybe one or two others. I don't think they should take any federal money because it inhibits, it's an obstacle to providing a fair and education, because they've got to please the federal government. That's what's enabling Trump to put that pressure. On the other hand, he can't, at least legally, he can do it through his bully pulpit. He cannot require private companies to get rid of DEI in terms of the cast of the white eye. He's going to try and pressure them. But as we've said here, I would certainly stand by companies like Costco and I think a few others that have said, no, we are going to continue these programs. Because as long as you're not involving racial or gender preferences, it's perfectly constitutional.
Hey, Phil, let me ask you a question. This might be a little bit, admittedly, this might be a stretch and a bad analogy. Do you favor monopolies?
I would say as a general rule, no.
Why not?
Because it becomes, you get a worse product and at a higher price.
Worse product at a higher price. Not good.
Not to throw this in, why I support school choice so strongly, because it produces competition instead of giving one entity a monopoly. You like how I got that in there, guys?
Okay.
You like that? See?
I like the school choice thing.
You know I want to comment, but I won't.
No, I read it.
So let me
Please, I
ask-
can't get it.
I think I know where he's going with this.
Go ahead.
I think I know where Kevin's going with this. I
So
want to
let
see
me
him
ask you this. Let
I'm
me
always
ask you
on the hot
this.
seat
So
of this
a
show.
lot of times you have monopolies because you may have a company that's so big that they can afford to just kind of come in and buy up all of the competition, just buy everything. They're so much bigger than everybody else. The little guy doesn't have an opportunity to compete in there. That's why we think monopolies are bad. So let's transfer this to development. Let's just say developers. So if every time the city of Cincinnati has a development project, if it's merit-based, then it would stand to reason that the bigger, more established developers would always get all of the products or all of the projects, namely because of their size, and you could say merit. But all of the little guys who are trying to come up and become like the big developer would never have an opportunity to do that within the city of Cincinnati if we go solely off of this sort of merit-based type thing. It sort of lends to the powerful being able to dominate all the time. So sometimes we come up with these, for lack of a better term, DEI programs, or let's just say programs that make exceptions for the little guy, the small group, so that they have an opportunity to get in on the business that otherwise would be monopolized by the bigger companies. So when we look at the history of this nation, many minorities, particularly Black people, let's talk about that, have not had the opportunity to build or create large, dominant industries in any industry. Like anybody who's at the top of any kind of pecking order in any industry is generally not somebody who's Black. So how does one ever scale that Mount Everest of going from the little guy to being one of the big guys if there aren't exceptions or things made to allow them to
Okay,
participate?
I'll answer that. I think it should be based on their financial situation, not their race. Now, let's take as an example in college admissions. Okay, there's no question if you read that Supreme Court decision. I mean that University of North Carolina and Harvard, who were the defendants, were clearly, in some cases, they were definitely at least considering race as a factor. No, there's no denying that. Okay, I was talking to a friend just last night. He's a doctor. He's black. His daughter goes to very prominent university, and I'm talking this out with him. I said, Rod, the truth is, I don't think you or your daughter at least came from a disadvantaged background. I don't think she ought to be given any benefit because of her race. Now, on the other hand, if you have a white person or black or any who came from a poor, low-income background, I think that is perfect. That's what should be considered, not the race. And as far as your example, like the city of Cincinnati, I think the way to do it is to have a policy that says, listen, we're going to get bids from the big companies, but we're also going to get bids from smaller companies. I think that, and I believe that's constitutional. But the problem is, it hasn't been that way. Okay, and frankly, I could go into this from my own experience. The ripoffs that cities like Cincinnati have gone through because of this minority business thing are just horrendous. And what happens, as you probably know, is that you get some big white developer, okay, and he uses some black guy or woman as essentially a pass through. Okay, it's just too easy.
Yeah.
It's too easy to rip off that when it's based on race and gender. So again, the answer to the question is, it's one thing to say we're going to give small businesses a chance. It's another thing to say we're going to give people who have a certain race or gender a chance. That's my response.
The only challenge that I have with that, and I don't disagree with, what you said there, but you separate sometimes the notion that economics and race are not married. Like that's the piece that I think
they aren't always
that you miss on
okay,
that.
So
like you want to make the case for economics, which I'm not going to argue against, but you can't separate the fact that socioeconomic that race and economics are oftentimes intertwined.
Well, I think historically the reason why probably African Americans are financially at a lower level than white people is clearly because of discrimination over the years. Okay, there's no question about that. I don't deny that. Not to mention slavery, breaking up families, all that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, there are some black people, like my friend, the doctor, who his father was a doctor, so he and his daughter, who's at a university, they are clearly not disadvantaged. Okay, so it isn't like every case. Everybody who's black is financially disadvantaged. So to eliminate the gender, race,
the majority,
which is unconstitutional anyway, if you base it on what they have actually overcome or had to overcome in their life, usually from a low income environment, I think that's perfectly legitimate.
But see, I thought you were going somewhere else with it, Kevin. I thought you were going somewhere else with it. I thought you had Phil set up perfectly.
Yeah.
You did, huh? Hey,
yeah, you had him set up. I thought he had you set
that.
up perfectly because he got you to admit, and most people would agree with this unless you are benefiting from the monopoly, that monopolies are bad, right? For a lot of different reasons. Bad for the consumers, they're bad for a lot of different reasons. Well, white people have a monopoly. White people have a monopoly on everything, every industry, every case.
Yeah, that was where I was. Is that where
you're going?
Okay, yeah. I didn't get a chance.
I got him off track. See, I was very successful. I got him off track.
Yeah, I saw you cooking. I'm like, yeah,
you got Phil to admit,
and then come on,
like he got Phil to admit, and that's hard for a lot of I've seen white men to admit that Usually it's like, well, I didn't have any slaves. Slavery didn't affect me. It's hard to admit that black men and black women are at a disadvantage. Like I thought Kevin used the analogy the other day about doing a track meet and giving somebody a 20 yard ahead. If you're doing a 100-yard meet and 20-yard ahead, and I wanted to throw something on there. It's like running and catching up to them. Then they got somebody behind you trying to trip you and throw you stuff, and it's all nepetism. And that's why I agree that
we never caught up.
And I agree, like with the white people on top, and they use DEI as a buzzword, and then they don't do anything. They just pass it on to their sisters and their wives and their cousins, the white women. That's why I don't agree with DEI. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to give black people something, and then we're not going to give them anything, and then we'll take it away, and they'll be mad.
Irnanetta keeps telling you that it's not just about giving black people stuff. She keeps saying it.
I give up.
It's not just about
It's
in
a
the
man.
context of our conversation, Terry, you were right.
No, but
though.
I'm saying they use it as a buzzword and a mask because they're not going to do anything for black people anyway. But they're saying, okay, we're going to lump black people, women, disabilities, everybody in one thing, and then the loudest cheerleader that's
what Trump is doing.
That's what DEI is.
That's what Trump is doing.
Okay. If the majority of the people, think that DEI is should be done away with, and the majority of the people elected Donald Trump to do it, there's no sense in everybody going back there and talking about DEI. We need to repivot and put something in place that is going to be better. We got to have people at the table that are going to do something better. Let's forget about DEI. It's gone.
But that's the thing about Donald Trump. Donald Trump always wants to get rid of things, but he never offers a better alternative. Look, if you want to tell me that there's something out there that's better than DEI, that's going to open up opportunity and make it, I'm all for it. Right. Present it, brother. Bring it to the table. Let's talk about it. Let's debate it. Let's implement it. But don't tell me we're going to get rid of something that is producing results and you don't have anything for it. Like here's what Phil said that I give him credit for, but also frustrates me. It's like Phil will say, well, there's no doubt that there's an economic gap because primarily black people have been discriminated against. And so that is why more black people, why you have proportionally more poor black people or whatever. But then he stops there. Like he won't allow himself to go that extra step to talk about what is the remedy for that discrimination. So it's not enough. And this is a typical white person's move, not against you, Bill. The typical white person's move is to acknowledge racism. Oh yeah, racism exists, but they will not go that next. A lot of them will not go that next step to talk about how to remedy it. So the confession is not enough. The confession is not enough. That what has to come after the confession is the remedy. So what are you prepared?
Well,
what are you prepared?
Let's
to
take the track meet.
That will
take this track meet analogy that several of you have used on different occasions. Yeah, my response on that track meet thing is okay. This race, track race, that is, has been is delegitimate. Okay, but from now on, every race, everybody starts equally. Okay, that's my response. In other words, what I say, and I try to put this in this piece I told you about, is trying to give benefits to a race or a gender that has been deprived or discriminated against, trying to give them benefits over what benefits are going to, say, white men. It's a futile thing because there's just no way to measure. And where does it stop? It's like I've talked about with the police issue. Okay, maybe it was necessary from 1980 to 2000, but for the last 20 years, I don't think so. All right, so I mean, I just think, and let's be honest, guys. There's not much point in us debating racial preferences because the Supreme Court has said, as directly as it can, they're illegal, they're unconstitutional anywhere.
So if that's the case, then if racial preferences are illegal, and that's not what that's not what, or unconstitutional, I'm sorry. If racial preferences are unconstitutional, and we're saying that that's not what DEI is,
no,
what's the problem?
I'm not. I'm saying DEI is more than one thing. It is both. I mean, in people's mind, it's both. And I think realistically, it is both racial preferences and it is casting the wider net. Okay, what Trump is doing is he knows what people really, really don't like are the preferences, black over white or female over whatever. So he's trying to lump them all together to juice up his base and to probably get a majority of the country to support it.
So wait a minute. So basically there's this, and you would probably agree with this, being the legal scholar that you are. So if racial preferences have already been ruled, if racial preferences have already been ruled unconstitutional according to the U.S. Supreme Court, that means if I feel like I'm a victim of racial preferences, I can take you to court, sue, and get remedy. Yeah. True? So then if that's the case, so if it's already unconstitutional and against the law and there's legal redress for it, and you believe that that's the case with that, in some cases with DEI, not all. So if we're going to say it's not all DEI, but it's in some cases, then why the need to eliminate it when there's already a legal redress for it if it's taking place?
As I just said, there is no need or any constitutional basis that I see for not recruiting minorities or casting a wider net. Okay. However, but as I just said, what Trump and others are doing is they're taking DUI and only focusing on what is unconstitutional, which are the racial and gender preferences. He's basically he's pulling the wool over people's eyes, okay, by saying that's all DEI is.
I agree.
So yeah, so again, so that leads to the argument that many of us are making, is that Donald Trump is falsely using racial preferences as a way to eliminate legitimate constitutional programs aimed at diversity, because there's already legal redress. There are discrimination laws. So if you feel like a university or a workplace is participating in racial preferences or things that are unconstitutional or illegal, you don't need a federal law. You've already got law in place to attack that and redress that. Yeah. So if that is your concern about existing DEI programs, then shouldn't that be what we're compelling people to do? Like, if you feel like you're being treated unfairly, like every other good American, go sue in court.
And one of the examples I bring in the article I talked about in the show is there's New York City has what they call specialized high schools, which are kind of like Walnut Hills type school high schools that are very they have an admissions test. They're very high performing. Okay. And the problem from de Blasio's standpoint was their percentage of minority or Hispanic and Black students was like 10%. And basically he said that's too low. Okay. And so he basically tried to get rid of the tests, the what I would say objective test, he tried to get rid of that and basically give preference to Blacks and Hispanics. Okay. And as you probably know, a group of Asian American parents whose kids were negatively impacted by this, because there were a very high percentage of Asian Americans that qualified, they sued, and at least so far they've been successful in doing that. But I agree with you, Kevin, that first of all, there's no logic in what Trump's doing. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about he has no principles. He just knows that the word DUI is a dog whistle that has a lot of power to it, okay? And so he's throwing it out there for any kind of DEI. I mean, that's what he's doing.
So my last point on that, and this will ultimately bring it back to my main point about why this is needed. So if this notion of Trump pandering and playing on people's racial prejudices and using DEI as a dog whistle, and given that over 50% of Americans who voted anyway, or at least a preponderance of the people who voted for this guy to be president, what does that say about the presence of racial prejudice and bias that exists? And if racial prejudice and bias exists in that large of an amount, that he can throw that red meat and that dog whistle out there and people eat it up, slurp it up, and take it. And by the millions of numbers that they did, What does that say to us about how concerned minorities ought to be about fairness and equal opportunity?
What I think you're doing, though, is you're equating the fact that people are opposed, and because people, I believe, are opposed to racial and gender preferences. That's what they're really opposed to. Okay? And you're saying, well, what this shows about our society is the majority of people are racist, essentially, is what you're saying. And I would say that there are, I think there's a large segment of people like me, okay, that hopefully are not prejudiced against women or blacks, whatever, but do not support gender and racial preferences. Okay? I don't necessarily think, I don't think people who are opposed, and again, I want to separate the two types of deal. I don't think people who are opposed to gender and racial preferences are necessarily racists or sexists.
Yeah, they don't see themselves as that way, but here's what they don't see that the rest of us see. And someone made this point in the comment, and I've said this before, like most of white America doesn't see preference when they're the ones getting the job.
Right.
They assume that no preference or bias was involved when the result turns out in their favor. But when it doesn't turn out in their favor, then the process becomes questionable, right? Why is this person getting it? But there's never any scrutiny or investigation when the process nets all white or mostly white results, because that is what is expected. It's never questioned, because in white society, they're not going to question it because they're the primary beneficiaries of it. So it may not be racism, but it sure as hell is selfishness. It sure as hell is self-serving. And that's my point behind it, is that it may not be racism. A person may not see themselves as racist, but they sure see, hey, we seem to be benefiting disproportionately from this, and I never questioned that. And
I'll also add to that, Kevin, that, Phil, to your point about casting the wider net, unfortunately, there are still a population of people in this country that are in control that don't believe in casting the wider net. So if they don't think about the opportunities to ensure that jobs are open across the board, that you are reaching as many populations of people as possible, to Kevin's point, it's not a problem because the folks that they want in those roles end up in those roles anyway. It doesn't become a problem until you have, a person that they didn't expect to get the job. If everybody operated from the premise of, we believe that diversity is important, right? That we believe in order for us to have the kind of community that we want, the kind of society that we want people with different beliefs, with different values, with different thought processes. We want all of those things. Then we wouldn't be having the conversation, because that means that those things would be automatic. But because that's not the norm, something has to say, what will you do to cast the wider net so that you are able to get individuals that have different views, different viewpoints, and adding to the fabric of the overall democracy? And I think that that's the piece that gets missing, because to your point, we know what this administration is doing in terms of using that term DEI, but there are a population of people that are just like him. And they make DEI synonymous with being Black and being unqualified. It's not just a matter of being Black, it's being Black and not being qualified. And so as a result of that, you get where we are now. So let's use that as the dog whistle, so to speak, to get people riled up and not think about the consequences that happen on the other end for individuals.
Well, I think that's a fair point. But I think we also have to admit there have been some excesses when it comes to whether you call it affirmative action or specifically racial and gender preferences. Interesting thing about this high school in New York that I was talking about, when there was some guy graduated 50, 40 years ago, or was making a comment that what was really great about this test, okay, was one of the benefits that was seen for years was it was a test. It protected against discrimination because everybody takes the same test, okay? But because Bill de Blasio is upset that there aren't more Black and Hispanics that it's pass the test, and pass this test, this academic test, they're going to basically play with the numbers or play with things to change that. And I think that is a pretty good example of what I would consider a bit of an excess. And that excess is probably probably influence those who perhaps voted for Trump and that kind of thing.
So here's a better approach to that, and I think what DEI tries to accomplish. So let's just say this. Phil always push back on this notion of objective testing, and I would love for Irnanetta, who's in
I was ready
to comment on this
Don't
notion
gang
of
up on me,
objective
but
testing.
I was ready.
Well, Phil, for the sake of the argument, because it's not even relevant to argue against that with you. I'm going to concede that point that this is an objective test. Let's just say that for the sake of argument, and you're finding that women, minorities, whatever, are not passing the test, right? And therefore not being able to get the test.
Many are.
A better approach to it would be to say, hey, instead of just sitting back and letting it ride, if you really wanted to increase your diversity, somebody might want to sit back and say, well, why is it that seemingly women and minorities are not able to pass this test? Okay, let's invest some time and energy into figuring out why we're not seeing these results, and then try to solve for that. So is it training? Is whatever it is? So now
I'm all for that.
We want to. So again, this is what DEI in part is designed to do, to problem solve around why there is a lack of diversity. What I'm saying to you,
the
though,
answer
is
isn't to play with the test or get rid of the test. The answer is, as you said,
you may have to, but you have to be open in that examination field that the objective test that you think is objective, that if the investigation determines that part of the problem is the test that you think is so objective is not, then maybe we do have to fix the test, right? So that means you have to be open to the idea that your process is not flawless. Okay, that's the only thing I'm saying.
Again, using that example, that school, as I read and understand it, the test was designed to protect against that kind of discrimination, because whatever you want to say about it, everybody takes the same test. You can't blame it on, it's the boss, hiring somebody that he's comfortable with, the white guy he's comfortable with. The benefit of that, and the same with the police, okay? Everybody takes the same test.
But inherently in most tests, most of the psychometricians that are actually creating the test, there's lack of diversity in that space. So when we think about it, most of the tests are biased to start with. When you just think about just the test within itself. Now, that doesn't mean that individuals that are diverse cannot be successful on the test, but that's just inherent in what standardized assessments are. That's something that you see. It's been studied, it's been proven, it's been the reality of it. So to Kevin's point as well, it's, do you wait another 10, 15, 20 years to say, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to do a study and we're going to figure out how to get this right? Or do you let opportunities bypass individuals where it could be tweaking some things here or there so that you are able to cast a wider net? Because it goes back to the same thing, casting the wider net.
Here's the other thing that I'll say with the testing, and another problem that may have been endemic with the problem that you had in the Cincinnati Police Department. I didn't take the test. Admittedly, I don't know what the questions were, but there's a difference when we're talking about leadership. Like, there's the difference between somebody who can answer every question on the test and a person who's a leader. Just because I can answer every question on the test don't mean that I'm a leader of men and women.
Question.
And so I think one of the challenges that you saw in some of the people who were leading the police department, they were good on the test, but they sucked at leaders. They sucked at understanding diversity. Right? They sucked at understanding diversity. So just because I can pass the test, that doesn't necessarily guarantee, even in that I'm the best person for the job.
But based on your point, which I think is a legitimate point, that people hire, like white people running some business, hire people they're more comfortable with. At least when you have a test the same test everybody takes, at least you protect against that. It's like you can't have it both ways, Kevin. You can't say, well, we need to consider things, qualities, leadership, and other than the test. Well, then you start getting into interviews and things that are more subjective. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. When you're right, when you do get into the interviews, you get into that territory that I've talked about. You're absolutely right about that. The trade-off with the test, again, I just don't believe that there's anything as an infallible test that is objective. I don't believe in that. And that is also not the best determiner of whether somebody is equipped to lead, if that's what we're going on. So I don't disagree with what you're saying. Maybe you can have it both ways. But that's why I say, like, looking into these processes where, maybe it's not one person making a decision, maybe it's and I've seen different workplaces look and do this. They do it with a panel of folks who all conduct the interview or sit in there, and it's not one person who's making the decision. There may be no foolproof, infallible way to prevent any of this. I think for me, it's more of the acknowledgement that these things are at stake, and that we are cognizant of them, and that we are accounting for them, and that we're not just automatically defaulting to this notion of, oh, hey, we're colorblind and I'm not racist and all of this stuff. Look, DEI is just challenging us and saying, hey, you got to be intentional about protecting against your blind spots. That's pretty much what it is. And we all have them. I'll give you a perfect example. I have a lot of male blind spots, right? And this is how I can relate to it. And I've been in some situations where I've made decisions that were exclusive of women, not because I wanted to be exclusive of women. It just wasn't in my thought process. I wasn't being malicious. I wasn't trying to be offensive. It just never occurred to me that, what, this conversation or this meeting that I'm having would benefit by having a female voice in the room who could add some perspective or maybe think of some questions that I hadn't thought about. Right? Not that I'm not capable of asking good questions. Well, let's just face it, women think differently than men, and they will come at things from a different perspective that we don't. I was blind to that, not intentionally. It just came out of my manhood. Hey, this is a meeting. We're just gonna go in and do this thing. But when a woman brought that to my attention, it made me think about it, and now it's a check that I use now. That I'm just like, okay. Am I, and when we're having these high level conversations, am I making sure that the right people are in the room to help me get the best results, right? And of course, I want those to be the smartest people from those areas that are represented, right? People who are actually going to lend something to the room, not just anybody. So that goes without saying. But having diverse voices in the room matters, and we all have blind spots despite even the best of our intentions. And that's what experience in life has taught me, is you got to be intentional. You got to be thinking about it, because if you don't, it's too easy to skate past it. In the busyness and trying to get stuff done, it's real easy to forget about, people who are not like you, who are different, and whether their voices are represented or present to help make the end result better. And I think that's all DEI is trying to accomplish.
Not like us.
Absolutely, 100%. Appreciate your time.
I got one final thing. Can I address a question in the audience?
I gotta jump off, guys.
Okay, good seeing you.
Sure. Thank you next time.
Bye, Irnanetta.
Bye.
Someone in the comment asked, how can I be like pro-black and then be be not in the Democratic Party? And I want to address that in a minute soliloquy, if I can. I was raised with my father, biological father, uninterrupted and unalienated relationship with my father, biological, who was born in the 30s. So he went through World War II, got the vouchers, all that kind of stuff. When the party switch happened in Vietnam, all that kind of Army veteran, when the party switch happened, he didn't switch. He stayed with the Republican side. So I got, from 1973, I was fed in Republican values. Let's fast forward to now. Whenever I'm in in the political process. I'm not just on the I'm actively involved in politics in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And the Commonwealth of Kentucky has a super duper jaduper majority. And I want to make difference and write legislation. I'm not going to align up with a group on the Democratic side who socially I don't align up with them. And for their social justice advocacies, I don't align up with them. I line up more with the conservative side. And just for pure politics, I line up with the conservative side and the Republican side because I had uninterrupted, unalienated relationship with my father that stuck like every father wants for their son. So you want to spit knowledge out to your son and he receives it for a lifetime. That's what I got. Just like you want for your sons, like I thrive to have for my sons. So when people ask me, how can I be so passionate about being a conservative and being a Black Republican and being conservative? Because it's ingrained in me and I believe in this stuff. And I do not align up with any of that stuff on the other side. So if that doesn't answer your question, and I can be pro-Black and I can go in front of these Republicans and speak Black issues like reparations and I can speak on these things confidently and not have to, and people like people call me coons and all these kind of names. Whenever people call me names like that, I automatically know I win. If you can't have an articulate conversation with me and you get to know me for those things that I just said to you, and I have a wife who's a Democrat who is involved in writing people, if they have to do generative hernia surgery, my wife she's a part of that process. And we can love each other. There's no reason why people on the other side can't agree to disagree, especially if we have the same color. And I'll leave it there. I just wanted to clarify that for anybody out there who's talking at coon talk, at Uncle Tom step and fetch it talk. I challenge you to debate me in any tough topic when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I'll eat your lunch.
I like you just a little bit
You
more.
know,
that was a little barbarian right there.
Harris,
What? Man, Nathan, you
I'm rubbing
taking
off.
over, man. You are taking over.
Harris, I think this barbarian stuff is
influence.
kind of impacting you. Sounds
It
like,
is.
you know.
Hey, Nate, I need a sword. I need a sword.
I won't say for better or for worse,
I
but
need
I
one
think
too.
Nathan's thing's having kind of an impact, kind of an influence on
I
you.
like it.
On you too, Phil. Yeah. On you too, Kevin. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
And
I
vice
got
versa.
a little barbarian today. Y'all
Yeah.
can,
And
yeah,
vice versa, man. Because what I found is I go home and I'm thinking about what people said. And I'll go back and I look at parts of it like, okay. So that's hopefully people at home are doing the same thing. Like, I don't have to be right. None of us are always right.
right.
You know, we got opinions that kind of touch a nerve in people or they don't. So, you know, people can make their own decisions up about where they fall. And usually it's going to be somewhere in the middle. We already know that. So,
Well, I mean, the reality is like we like to talk about a lot of these issues in black and white terms, sometimes literally black and white terms, but these are complex issues, right? And you solve for one thing and it leads you right up against another brick wall that you have to try to solve for. And the reason for that is people are complex. They're different. We're not all of any one particular thing, and I think if you think through some of this stuff, man, you wind up having arguments with yourself because you're just like, man, I want to feel this way, but I kind of see this based on the facts and the situation. I can kind of see that a little bit, where people are making this point. And it's kind of like where I'm at with the immigration thing. It's like I absolutely, as a human being, as a pastor, as somebody who believes in taking in the foreigner and all of that type of thing, I certainly relate to what you are, to the point that you were arguing, Nathan, about, hey, is it right to uproot people and break up families and deport them? Like, I feel that. But I also can feel the very real hypocrisy that I kind of laid out there for you in terms of how we subject U.S. citizens, many of them who look like you and me, to the legal system in ways that we're saying people who break the law should not be held accountable for. And I also have a real problem with that. Because like I said, if I miss a court date and the police pull me over, I'm going to jail. So how do I reconcile that? And I've been in the country for 50 years. I'm a citizen. How do I reconcile that with somebody who is not here legally, who've been here 20 years? They got a family, I got a family. So they shouldn't be held accountable by the same justice system that I did because.
Well, the difference is they're being deported. So yeah, hold them accountable.
I'm being deported.
What happened when didn't Hillary Clinton
Depending-
and Barack
depending
Obama
on what-
said get them
depending
out
on
of here?
what law-
Both of them. I got video of both
Yeah,
of them in their presidency.
Hey,
They said
man,
get them out of here.
depending on
They
what
create
law.
big
Obama was
crimes,
the
get 'em out.
deporter in chief. He was called the deporter in chief.
Hey, look, Nathan, if you
Yeah.
go to jail or prison, you go into a foreign land that ain't like nowhere where you've been from before.
That's
So-
not like being
Guantanamo
deported
Bay.
though, bro.
Hey, at least if you get deported back to Mexico, you free. I mean,
Yeah, but
you
are you free?
still free to,
Are
still
you really
to
free?
move around?
But are you really free? Like, if you have spent 20 years here, right, as a so-called illegal, I still hate that term, but
Would you
get
rather go to
picked up,
jail or England?
and you get picked up, and they drop you off in Mexico, you don't know that you ain't been there in 20 years.
Hey
You
man,
don't-
let me ask you,
you may
this.
not
You
have
rather go to-
family,
Would
you
you
don't have
rather
no
go to
job.
prison in?
It's
Would you
not the
rather go
same.
to prison in these United States or go to Mexico?
Mexico,
It
they
depends. I
getting
mean, some would
Guantanamo
probably-
Bay ready.
Some might choose to go to these
I
prisons.
think everybody on this chat, if you said, would you rather go to jail or would you rather go to Mexico? What flight you gonna put me on?
Some would choose jail. Now, if you said prison,
The
that might
prison.
be
Yeah,
different.
that's what I mean.
So-
Like yeah.
Some might choose it. I don't know. I don't see. That's a whole different. I don't know what it's like to feel that way. I don't know.
You're gonna choose freedom over behind bars. And that, and
I mean,
I
you're
guess
talking
that's the
to an
only point
American
that I'm making.
citizen.
Again, not that I'm
So
not.
saying that to me, Kevin, I understand what you're saying. But if I'm trying to put my head into the space of somebody who has been here for 20 years, they got a job, they got a home, they got a whole life here, they got kids here, and you telling me they're gonna choose to go to? I don't know. I don't know, but I hear what you're saying though. But you know,
I mean,
Donald Trump got us again,
here's
though,
the
bro.
thing that I think.
Donald Trump got us again because just like he oversimplified the conversation about DEI, just lumping it together, he's done the same thing when it comes to so-called illegals, right? Because they're not all the same. I don't think that anybody I don't think any of you or anybody in the chat would agree that we should treat somebody who is here illegally that has committed crimes, maybe violent crimes, the same as we should a person who's here illegally but has committed no crimes. They're productive members of our society, and they're contributing to the tax rolls, and in every other way, they're just a citizen. I don't think those people should be treated the same. All right,
Yeah.
absolutely. Hey guys, I'm not going to hold you. I'm gonna let you go and just end the show because I know Phil's going to run out. It's going to take us down to 3. So we've been on for a while. But does anybody have anything they want to say? We kind of got into it a little bit. Or forever hold your peace. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Anybody want to say anything? We circle the bases here. Anybody gonna say anything?
I'll just say this to Terrace because I know he said this with some passion. No, this is serious. I know he said what he said about the Coon and the Uncle Tom comments, and I'll say this to you, man. Look, outside of Donald Trump, I don't think anybody should be called. I don't think anybody should be called names. I mean, I feel you on that, man. I know that for any black person, particularly any black man, being called that is not anything that any of us would relish to be called. I agree with you that just because we might disagree politically or disagree on an issue, that doesn't mean that we got to assault one another in those ways. Like you know, I can attack your ideas without attacking your person. I can say that I think your ideas are full of crap without necessarily judging you as a man or as an individual.
I gotta go, guys. Good discussion.
And, yeah, thanks, Bill. And I hope that at some point, even as we deal with each other, that we can say, hey, we can have a vigorous debate of ideas, you know, and where we disagree on that, but try to do it as respectfully as we can with each other. And I get, you know, a lot of this stuff is personal for people, and, you know, values and things are associated with it, as we were just talking about the morals, and people have a hard time separating what they feel are their values and their morality from some of these political arguments, and it becomes intensely personal, and we take it out on the people that that we're debating against, but I think we got to find a better way to have these conversations, because we still got to live with each other at the end of the day, and we can't create an environment where we've made it impossible to look each other in the face and live together despite our differing opinions, and we got to do better. So I just wanted to extend that to you, my brother.
I agree. Listen, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate you. We'll be back on Friday at 1 p.m. for more Hot Mic. And tap in if you got the time. We really appreciate you. And guys, thank you for your time. Take it easy.